What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of the CTW podcast. Guys, this is one of my favorite episodes we record every year because for a couple reasons. One, because this marks the official first production shoot of the playoff time. This is like when you see this video getting uploaded and posted and we're sitting here recording it, you know the playoffs are here. And also, it's a great opportunity to sit down and review the season that we just had. Guys, welcome into the roster report card episode 2024-2025, the annual tradition. I'm your host, Rob Haytayan. Join with me are my two co-hosts, Seamus Zarlingo, Nick Franco. You guys know them. You know them. Let's get into this, guys. So if you're new here, what we're going to essentially do is we're going to go down the roster here, right around 15, 16 guys, couple guys, two-way deals, couple guys not on the roster anymore, however they played games for us this year. And we're essentially going to give them a traditional grade school grading, A, B, C, A minus, D, like whatever it might be. We're going to give them the grade. It's always fun. We're going to start at the top end of the roster, guys. So we're going to start with the man, Jason Tatum. It feels like a little rushed. I'm already talking about JT, but guys, so let's get this ball rolling. I'm going to start us off here with Jason Tatum. Now, I gave him an A, solid A. And here's why. I was leaning, he was not touching B+. What Tatum did this year, statistically, from an impact standpoint, it was in the A category. Now, an A+ season for Jason Tatum, for me, and maybe this is unfair because I'm putting a different standard on the grading scale for Jason Tatum, but it's the MVP year. That to me is that A+ season. So for me this year, if you look at him like from a statistical standpoint, I mean, he's an A of 27 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. Efficiency wise, he was right around what he normally does, just under his career average from the floor, 3% under his 3-point career average. So I wasn't gonna knock him for that, guys. But when you look at the kind of the injuries and what Boston dealt with, Tatum was kind of the catalyst. It felt like in from that December to February stretch of keeping them afloat. I went with an A. Seamus, where are you at with JT?
Okay, I'm gonna have to disagree on this one. I gave him an A+.
I gave him an A+. I can see the vision. I can see that vision.
Now the reason I gave him an A+ is because, well, it's the other end of the MVP conversation. It's that he had an MVP-like season with the Boston Celtics. And if you think Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if their parents never get busy, Jason Tatum is the MVP this season. Maybe Giannis too. I know Giannis, he's climbing in the MVP ladder as well, which if Giannis finishes third in MVP, I mean, that is the most backdoor third place finish in MVP history for the NBA. I mean, we had Jason Tatum slotted in at third all year long, and all of a sudden people are thinking and talking about, ooh, Giannis for that third place. But Jason Tatum, regardless of if he's third or fourth, he had an MVP-like season, and I can't help but give him an A+ because we thought Jason Tatum, what we saw last year in 23-24 was the pinnacle of Jason Tatum, yet he only got better this season in his age, 26, 27 season. Right now, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both going into the meat of their primes. And Jason Tatum in particular, he had himself the best season of his entire career. And I can't help but give him an A+ right here. I would be acceptable of an A, but this gets an S too. Satisfactory for Jason Tatum as well. So A+, yes. And an S for Jason Tatum.
It's just real quick. It's just maybe I'm holding him to an unfair standard with the A. Maybe that is. Maybe only Tatum I'm giving that look.
Well, here's what we can look at is, did Jason Tatum improve from last year? Yes. I would say that his game has drastically improved, and until we see him digress in his play since the past 2 years ago, it's been an A+, and I have no reason to mark him down grade or any lower than an A+ because I've graded him so highly in the past 2 years, and we've only seen him improve from that point. It's not like we've seen him plateau in any standpoints, and when it comes to the MVP conversation, when Jason Tatum is going to be in the MVP conversation, which is undoubtedly for the next few years, upcoming ongoing years that we can see in the foreseeable future, we'll see him kind of get more of that accolade and respect in that category once this team starts to slim down a little bit in talent. When you start to see this team start to make sacrifices, and this is why this year is so important for us Celtics watchers to really enjoy this season while it lasts, because we don't know what these rosters are going to look like as time goes forward with the new owners, new management, CBA, and all that in the fold. But one thing is going to be inevitable for the Celtics. It's the death taxes, and Jason Tatum is going to be the premier player for the Celtics until the day he retires, or I don't even want to imagine the day that he would get moved. But I doubt that would even happen. But I just have only seen improvement, and when it comes to the MVP conversation, Jason Tatum's had a lot more talent dispersed around him to a point where it kind of makes it hard to weigh his success against players
Right.
like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Nikola Jokic, where their teams are primarily focused around the success of those players. And if those guys aren't playing at their top level, the Thunder and Nuggets are in the middle of the pack, and it's just I just Tatum kind of it's kind of unfair what Tatum's getting put in for national media and credibility, and also when it comes to grading his performances, it's hard to look past what he's been able to do with so much talent around him, and also being able to build upon his game for year in and year out. So A+ for me.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say I gave him an A- last year, if I can remember correctly. Maybe it's an A, I forget, but maybe it's an unfair standard. You guys got me contemplating that one. This next one, this is the toughest one, in my opinion. This is genuinely Jaylen Brown. This grading Jaylen Brown's season. Right? This is, in my opinion, the hardest player to look at, because Brown, from a efficiency standpoint, had kind of the worst year we've seen shooting splits wise since his rookie year. Statistically, points per game took a dip, but then you look at the playmaking department and he took such a big increase, and he was so much better this year in a whole different aspect of the game. And obviously, what he brings defensively. So Brown, for me, and maybe this is harsh, and maybe, but I give him a B+, because I think that when you look, and maybe this is recency with the injuries and whatnot, what I'm remembering now, but I think Brown had a little finals MVP hangover this year. And I think the expectations coming into this season were a little bit higher in my head. And I think Brown has been such a player where every year we've seen him get better. I mean, and obviously better. I don't know if I saw that this year from Jaylen Brown. I don't know if I saw, from every aspect of the game, he got better. I don't know if I saw that. I went B+. I think from a playmaking department, he was much better. But I do think there was a couple aspects. He struggled in areas he hadn't normally struggled. And I think defensively, he kind of had some mislapses, and I went B+.
Well, you think B+ is a little harsh. I thought that was a little generous. Quite frankly, I gave him a B-. I gave him a B- here because Jaylen Brown this season, first of all, he wasn't healthy the entire year. Didn't stay healthy all year. Didn't reach the 65-game threshold at the end of the season. Now we got to throw that out because we think maybe he was inching towards that and didn't get there because he was unhealthy to end the year. And there were other portions of the season where he wasn't exactly healthy. And this just felt like a different Jaylen Brown season compared to last year. It felt like last year it was Brown and Tatum. They would go back and forth, back and forth. One night it would be Tatum scoring 40. The next night it would be Brown scoring 40. And this year it felt like Tatum would be the one leading the team most nights. And then Brown, he would have his occasions where he would get 35, maybe 40 points on any given night. And it wasn't that consistent. It really wasn't. Jaylen Brown, I mean, he was hovering 15, 20, 25 points a game. It didn't feel like, oh, he's having these 40-point outbreaks, these 30-point outbreaks. Jaylen Brown was just kind of hovering around where his average actually is this season. And it just didn't feel like the same type of, I don't want to say dominant season, because it's not like Jaylen Brown absolutely dominated last year, but he was named to an all-star team last season. If I'm not mistaken, he was also named to an all-NBA team last year. Yeah, all-NBA second team. Or sorry, that was 2023. So it didn't make the
23, yeah, he
all-NBA
just
team.
came out,
Yeah.
yep.
So it didn't make all-NBA last year, but made the all-star team. And just this year, it just didn't feel like a consistent season for Jaylen Brown. We've talked about like some of this evaluation. I think back to what the narrative was or what the talking points were on these players throughout the season. And there was a good portion of the year where we're going, what's wrong with Jaylen Brown? Back in December, back in January. And then now at the end of the year, the past 2 weeks, we've been talking about his knee. So collectively, the whole season for JB, it just wasn't that, you know, back to back ideal year you want to see out of the second superstar of the Celtics. That being said, Tatum, he had such a great year. He made up for a lot of what Jaylen Brown didn't put out on the floor, and a lot of other guys in the lineup did, because we know the Celtics, how ultra talented and deep they can be on any given night. But Brown, just not the consistent year that we wanted to see, and that's why I gave him a B- here.
I must be the gym teacher in this school right here, the Celtics Talk Weekly University. I must be the gym class because I have the grades a little easier. I went with Jaylen Brown with the A- for this year. Despite the inconsistent play that we saw out of him, I would put a lot of credit to the fact that he has been injured, and we also saw kind of a new look out of the Celtics offense from what we saw last year, which allowed Jaylen Brown to have these stellar performances, being able to have a game where he is one of the focal points of this game, and it kind of seems like the Celtics are more basing their offense around Tatum than they were last year. You saw the ball a lot more dispersed throughout the team last year. That's why we saw Tatum play a little bit more of a playmaking role, kind of off to the side, one of the players that would have more assists than games that were scores, games where he was lighting up the scoreboard. But when it comes to Brown, what he brings to this team, what is a energy factor, and it was apparent when he was off the court that there were times that this team would struggle, and during the inconsistent runs of January, December, and February, early February, this team was struggling when Jaylen Brown was struggling, and with injuries when it comes down to that. And so I think that his role on this team is imperative, and it kind of is overshadowed. We've had some conversations, but I can see the point of where Brown will kind of need to take that passenger seat while Jason Tatum is in conversation for MVP runs. It obviously would be nice to have two guys that you can rely on to be those all NBA players, but when you also have three other mouths on the court to feed, it makes it much more difficult for those guys to reach the independent success that they are looking for.
Are you guys knocking points for time played that decreases in your grading system?
I think it has to, because I mean, look at a guy like Joel Embiid, 19 games this season. Obviously, that's an extreme measure, but it's like availability is the best ability. And somebody like Jaylen Brown, he plays 63 games this season, and I'm sure we're gonna get to Porzingis here in a second. But when you're only available for half of the season, I feel like it kind of some points are docked off there. But Jaylen Brown, the frustrating thing about him from my perspective of talking about his injuries this season is he came into the year super jacked. All right, he came into the year with more muscle on his body than he ever had before, and I looked at that muscle and went, you know, guys typically try to get a little bit lighter as their career goes on, because your cartilage in your knees, your ligaments, and all those things, those take a beating. And if you have more weight on your body, you can't necessarily bend and contort some of your joints and see a lesser impact on those joints compared if you have muscle on your body compared to if you have a little bit less muscle. You have more of a flow if you have less muscle. We've seen NBA players, specifically LeBron James. I mean, look at LeBron James back in 2013 versus today. We all know he's still very physical today, but he's generally a little more slender out on the floor. He has less weight on his body than he did back in 2013, and that all has to do that has to do with some of his success today because there's less impact on those joints and everything within his body, the cartilage and the ligaments, like I'm talking about. And that's the thing with Jaylen Brown coming into this year is more muscle. I thought that could equal more injuries, and yet what are we talking about later on in the season? Oh yeah, Jaylen Brown, his knee isn't feeling right, and oh, he's getting fluid injections into his knee. It's like this was almost a little predictable at the beginning of the year that something was going to go awry with JB, and I believe there was something else that happened earlier this year. Was it his back, if I'm not mistaken?
I
Was it a
believe
back
so.
injury?
I want to say it
Hauser
was
had a
still his
back
knee.
injury, but it was
I want to say it
some
was his
kind of
knee.
muscle. Oh no, I think it was the hip. The hip.
Oh, the hip.
It was the
yes,
hip.
yes.
So it was the hip at first. So that again, that has to do with more muscle on your body. If you're bending and contorting at your hip, it's like there's more impact on that area. There's more of a chance for injuries to actually happen. And Jaylen Brown comes into the year, immediately injures his hip, and then we see the rest of the year. Now he has a knee issue going into the playoffs. I mean, that to me, that's really frustrating from the standpoint of you'd think like, okay, what he did last summer was supposed to be the most optimal path towards himself being the best basketball player this season, but it feels like these injuries, they're not necessarily freak injuries. I mean, maybe there were moments in time where he took a wrong step or kind of turned the wrong way, and that's possible on a basketball floor. There's so many little jabs and movements that, we don't really see out on the floor, but yet, does something to a player later on in time. There could have been those occasions for JB, but I feel like some of his injuries this year have been related to how much muscle mass he has on his body from last summer and the way he trained and the way he came into this year. Now, it's kind of unfortunate because, he actually put in the work and put on all that muscle. And this is like the opposite of Embiid, right? Embiid
Right.
on his end, it's like, oh, you don't condition, you don't work, and that's why you're injured. But for Jaylen Brown, it's like the opposite. It's like, oh, you work too much on your body. Like you put in too much physicality on your body. But we'll have to see how that plays out going into the future next season and what he could look like over the offseason now, because I think we're going to get Jaylen Brown about, who knows? I don't really know. I said 75% last post game, but it could be lower than that. It could be a little bit higher in the playoffs, but he'll definitely come this offseason be rehabbing a knee injury, and he won't be as healthy as he was last summer. And next season's going to look a little more interesting when it comes to how Jaylen Brown will enter the season and what kind of shape he'll be in. But this year, I just felt like he entered the season almost too much muscle, and that kind of affected some of his ability out there. I shouldn't say ability, but availability, which is your best ability in the game of basketball or any sport. And Jaylen Brown, 63 games this year. He missed basically 20 games, and some of the games he played, it felt like really inconsistent ball at times. I mean, really inconsistent. Like this year, like last year's, the inconsistencies would be like, oh, Jason Tatum's having a great game, and Jaylen Brown's kind of taking the back seat. Now it's like there have been games where the Celtics may have needed Brown back in January, December, and it's like, was he there? Not really.
Right.
Amidst that, he did have good games, of course, though. Did make the All-Star team. Did have a couple of performances where, I mean, he made the All-Star team for a reason. I mean, he had some great performances on the season that did save the Celtics. But that's why you got to give, for me, that's why I got to give him a B- in this situation.
And I remember back coming into the season, that was a conversation we had on here, was this muscle and this hip. And now you say hip, it all clicks. In that hip, is that going to be something that you see when you add more muscle? That is, like you said, that is more pressure on those joints, and hip and knee are two major joints in terms or areas that of impact. And so that to me brings me to my next point, because maybe this screws up my grading system a little bit. Kristaps Porzingis, though, the way I look at KP is, you're right, the best ability is availability, no doubt. But Kristaps, when he was on the floor, probably put together the best season we've ever seen out of Kristaps Porzingis. So this one is really tricky for me, because half of me leans A-, and then the other half of me leans B-, because he only played 42 games. He played essentially half of the NBA season. I met right in the middle and gave him a B. And the reason being, because again, for a guy like KP, 42 games is about 20 under what you want to shoot for KP. You really want to shoot around 60 games for a guy like Kristaps. He played 57 last year, 65 the year before. That stint in Dallas and Washington a year prior was kind of a shaky one, 51. So this was the least amount of time he's played in his career. In a while too, 2020, 2021 back in Dallas, he played 43 games. So yeah, he didn't play a lot, but again, you look at his efficiency. I mean, he was very close to being a 50-40-90 player, 42% from behind the arc, 54% from the floor, averaging 20 points, 7 rebounds. I mean, he was a very, very big difference maker on the defensive end for Boston. So I went B. In really the only thing keeping Kristaps away from an A season was just the fact that he only played 42 games, because you do have to knock him for that. And it's like that weird, I mean, you look at a 10-game stretch where he just missed it for an illness. Like, is that his fault? No, but it's just like, you see stuff like that. You expect it to at least have him every night other than backs-to-backs post injury, coming back from that foot or ankle or Achilles, wherever, that tendon. It was like such a mystery ligament I had never heard before. Coming back from that surgery post December, you would like to have him more. So I went B. Feels a little low, but something tells me if you guys have been a little harsher, at least Seamus, you've been a little bit harsher upon injury. So I'm interested to see where you go with this.
So this is funny because I have him at an A-.
Okay,
wow.
See, now it's like, damn, did I go too low? Did I go too low?
No. So here's why I didn't go low on Kristaps. Is because you talked about that 60 game mark for him. I think he would have gotten there if, or at least near there, probably in the 50s, the high 50s, if he didn't miss the first 17 games of this season, rehabbing from an injury last season in which he played on in the NBA Finals. So looking at his games, I mean, first of all, this is the thing. This is why I give him an A-. I think he had an A+ season when he was on the floor for the Celtics. He was right. He was tremendous. And when he was on the floor, the Celtics were just at a different level. Now, I know there was that stretch in January where we were going, oh, the Celtics, they started out 19-4. Now they're 7-7 with Kristaps in the lineup. But we talked about that a long time ago. That had nothing to do with Kristaps being in the lineup whatsoever. That record didn't mean anything. But when Kristaps Porzingis otherwise was in the lineup for the rest of the season, huge difference maker on the floor and had one of his best seasons. Yet the games played 42. And this one does, maybe should I bring him down to a B+? Maybe should I, you could argue as low as, you went B, even potentially B- for Kristaps because of those games missed. But, I do look at the situation with Kristaps. I go, well, for one, we all knew coming into this season, he was going to miss some time at the beginning of the year. And we all thought it was going to be maybe January he came back into the lineup. He came back in November. He came back at the end of November, November 25th, against the Los Angeles Clippers. And from that point on, they put him on ice. I mean, back-to-backs, didn't play back-to-backs near the end of the season, resting him randomly, that Wizards game against his former team. That's where I look at, the difference between Porzingis and Brown and go, well, Brown, I expected him to be healthy at the beginning of this season, and I expected him to not be put on ice like they were going to do with Kristaps Porzingis coming off an injury last season. And right. Brown, he plays 63 games. He misses 20 games aside from where the expectations are. Whereas Porzingis, he actually played a couple more games than I thought he might at the beginning of the season. And then throughout the year, he didn't have the choice of sitting out back-to-backs and sitting out these occasions at the end of the year. Now, there was, that stretch, missed 8 games, 9 of 10 because of that illness. And he did miss some other time with a couple of nefarious injuries that we look back on where it was like, was that a ding? Was that, just the team resting him at the time? But I gave Kristaps an A- just because when I see his play on floor, that's the difference too between him and Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown, his play was very inconsistent up and down throughout the season. You would see phenomenal moments from JB, But then the next game, it's like, oh, what is this? He's scoring 8 points. He's shooting 1 of 7 from the field. What's going on? Whereas Kristaps, I felt like there were his games where he was shooting terribly. I know he had one the other night. It was probably a week and a half ago already, but he wouldn't really have bad shooting performances. I think it was that Charlotte Hornets game. He started out like 1 of 10 in that game. He didn't really have too many of those performances this year. It felt like outside of maybe when he first started in January, but once he got ramped up, I mean, it felt like Porzingis was just a consistent impact every single night when he was out on the floor, and that's why I go A- here because he was a huge, huge difference maker within the Celtics lineup. And I thought some of the games missed. It's Celtics putting him on ice, preserving him for later, and then also was expected to miss games at the beginning of the season. So that's where my evaluation system landed on Porzingis. I would not argue higher than an A-, but I could definitely see a lower grade here.
Let me meet you guys in the middle and say B+ for Kristaps Porzingis. I like that. So far, so good. We've been kind of within the same range. We haven't had any outliers yet on the grading scale.
No,
So
that's reserved for the bottom of the roster. I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like that's where we're gonna get some interesting ones.
That's when we reach Xavier Tillman, but Kristaps
see, that's gonna be the interesting one.
Yeah.
Maybe not, although because we're
but
we know about it.
Kristaps this year, I think I'm not. We expect. I didn't mark Kristaps Porzingis too low because of his injuries, because we kind of expected this, and we obviously knew that he was dealing with the injury coming into the season, missing 17 games to start off, and then I feel like the Celtics. This was the most preserved Kristaps Porzingis we've ever seen him on the Celtics roster compared to last year. We saw we are. I'm confident to say that we are walking into the playoffs with 100% healthy Kristaps Porzingis for the amount of time that he played. I think they might have been a little too conservative at times with his play time. So obviously, the back-to-backs are going to hinder a certain amount of games, at least 8 to 10 games out of the season were back-to-back. So that obviously is going to knock it down. But the quality and consistency of play that we saw at Kristaps Porzingis was absolutely phenomenal. He was an absolute game changer on the defensive end for this team when it came to their interior defense. During this team's struggles, we would mainly point out the fact that this team was kind of easy to get to the rim with, and once you got by the guards and wings, there was nothing really in the middle to stop them. And Kristaps really filled into that role this season. And also the threat that he's become on the offensive end with his shooting clip this season, and also becoming much more aggressive down low. We saw him park up right by the post a few times more this season than we saw in years past. Him really getting into the paint for offensive rebounds, him fighting with the bigs, also being very good on taking advantage of the pick and rolls or the pick and pops. You kind of saw him develop chemistry. We saw cookies and cream on the court with him and Jaylen Brown. We see the chemistry that him and Jason Tatum have on the court, down to Derek White and Jrue Holiday. They are all very. You can tell how happy they are to be playing with Kristaps Porzingis because he's just such a freak of nature, and I think that this season, kind of with him only playing 42 games, just it really makes me feel confident, because there wasn't really that many times this season we were looking at Kristaps' injuries and him sitting out, and we're asking the question, is this something that we need to be concerned about, other than the viral illness, which was mainly concerning because of the fact that he was the one who released it. It wasn't like a PR, and he also made it sound a lot more concerning on text than it seemed to really be, because we were me and Seamus were sitting here like viral illness. Like what could he have right now? Like that could be causing him to miss the season. Like when we're talking viral illnesses, we were like talking about like we had the tinfoil hats on CTW. Just like did an injection go wrong? Did he eat something bad on the flight home, or like we were just like up in arms when that came out? But to see him bounce back from that illness at 100% and show no cause for concern is the plus within itself. Because compared to last year when we were going into the playoffs with Kristaps, we were looking at him almost as if we were looking at, well, Jaylen Brown's a different story because he's going to be playing, but we were looking at Kristaps like, when are we going to be able to get him back? And when we get Kristaps back, what is he going to be? Is he going to be the same player that we saw before? He missed the first round of the last year's playoff, but this year we're starting off game one of round one with him, which makes it a B plus in my book.
Right. I really liked what you said. He didn't really miss any time. We didn't expect him to miss. That's pretty. I think that sums up the KP injury experience this year. Seamus also bring up a good point. Like if you take out the 17 game period where he really like it was like the last season's fault, right? If you want to point the finger where he played on in the finals and he kind of had to take a prolonged rehab process because playing in the finals adds about 2 extra months of recovery. That's fair. He touches 60 games. So I still, my grade's a little low now after hearing you guys talk. I think if I were to predict which one's going to be the most all over the place, Jaylen Brown is up there, but I think this next one, Jrue Holiday, might be like the most, it's going to be close because I was thinking about Jrue and like, Jrue, it's tough because when you think about the grading, it's like I can't grade based off player standards, right? Because then it's like it's so weird. But it's like, do I grade off player standards? Because you got to take they're not really submitting a test, right? So it's like it's weird. And Holiday had such a big defensive impact still this season. He did. He's been playing so great as of late. But I went with a C. I went with a C for Jrue Holiday because.
I want to be in your class.
I'm sorry. I know I've been harsh, but I do think there are players that we're going to get into that were a big portion of the Celtics' success this season that weren't some of these other guys that will be a portion of their success in the playoffs. Jrue was very apparently to me just maintaining his health and maintaining his body throughout this year. I could see in my head, I was like, was it a B minus? Was it a B? Like that C to B minus B range is kind of where I sat with Jrue. Defensively, he was an A, but I do think offensively all season long, I mean, he just took a huge hit in production. He shot 62% from the corner last year. He shot like 36 this year. I mean, he took a big step back from an efficiency standpoint. He shot 43 from deep last year, 35 from this year. He still managed to do 11, 4, and 4. And again, the defensive impact in the game planning that goes into Jrue is a lot more. So maybe C's a little harsh. But again, there were a lot of games this year where it's like you had Brown out of the lineup and you had Porzingis out of the lineup and Tatum gave you 30, White gave you 18, and you just needed that extra something, that extra energy from somewhere. And there were a lot of times this year Jrue didn't give that to us. So I set it a C, harsh maybe. But again, I want to preface this. We're going to get to some guys on this roster who had really good years and are kind of how I view them as regular season players. And I'll get more into that in a little bit when a couple 2 players pop up. You can probably guess them. But Holiday, older, coasting. We weren't leaning on him as much. I'm going to go C.
I'm going to go, here's what I went here with Holiday. C+. Okay. Because first of all, I mean, Holiday, nowhere looking at this season did he have a better year this year than he did last year with the Celtics. I mean, you could look at our thumbnails, you could look at our player spotlights. I mean, they don't really include Jrue Holiday as much as they did last season. And it's just evident from that standpoint. But you've already mentioned the productional standpoint of his game falling. I mean, that standpoint of his game falling off, the offensive production. Now, defensively, he did have some nice moments throughout this season, but really leading up to, I want to say February, March, somewhere around the All-Star break, Drew Holiday was just coasting. Was just coasting through games. 100%. And offensively wasn't really involved in the team too much. And then defensively, he just wasn't the same player as he was last season. I mean, we see the intensity, the physicality, the effort from last year. It really waned and wasn't there for part of this season this year. That being said, Drew Holiday to end the year and when the Celtics went on their runs, he was actually a big part of that. And that to me is huge when it comes to Drew Holiday and this playoff run coming up for the Boston Celtics. And to see him play well at the end of the season, that definitely showed me, along with a lot of other people out there. And you mentioned it, Rob, that throughout most of the season, he was just preserving himself. He wasn't going to go hard in December. He wasn't going to go hard in January. He wasn't going to go hard in February. Drew Holiday was always meant to go hard in April and beyond for the Celtics. That's what his main job was. And we'll see him do that in the playoffs because we've been seeing him do that for about the past month and a half now going into the postseason. But yeah, the production from Drew Holiday, just from an overall season perspective, certainly down from last year. You look at all of his numbers, whether it's scoring, rebounding, assisting, the shooting numbers. I mean, he's just shooting at a worse percentage. Forget the volume; he's just shooting at simply a worse percentage. But Holiday, considering where he is within his career, I mean, we were kind of eloping him with Al Horford earlier this season within the conversation of potentially resting him on back-to-backs and putting him on ice. And we saw there were a lot of nights where Holiday, Horford, and Porzingis, the Celtics managed them to the best of their abilities, keeping them out of games, keeping their minutes low. And for Giroux, I just look at his standards. This could have been a much lower grade if he didn't have the type of the end of the season he did, the type of the season at the end in which Drew Holiday had, turning the effort up, the intensity up a little bit more on the defensive end of the floor. This grade could have been much lower, but I'm going to keep it at a C plus because he did have a good end of the year, and for most of the year, just was not the same player whatsoever as he was last year. Whether that's because of his age, whether that's because of he was preserving himself, we know now it's probably more so the preserving part of him than it is the age. But that still factors into everything when it comes to the standards of Drew Holiday and where he's ranked here. I give him a C plus this season.
All right, I went a little bit above, so I went with a B minus when it comes to Drew Holiday. And here's why I think that the performances that Drew Holiday is what we're to expect out of him for the rest of his career. And we've kind of seen him take on that Mike Conley role. I'm trying to think of other examples off the top of my head, but just a player that you don't need to rely on to contribute in those scoring categories. Obviously, that level to his game is still there, and there were a lot of times that we wished we could have seen that at some point this season, even though there were a few sprinkle in games that he would have 25 points or so and would show that consistency. The 3-point shot would be on one night. And also just the IQ of what he plays with, it makes it really harder to put him any lower despite the effort that he would put in during games. You could see him playing a lot more preserved and saving his energy at some points, kind of taking a step back on the defensive end, not really guarding up on top of the key anymore, not taking the point guard usually on one scenarios, but in the zone looks that they would put out on the defensive end, the amount of times that he was able to take away a team's better player in the first half of the season was great to see. There usually that's when we were starting to see this team start to figure something out on the defensive end, and the interior defense wasn't as weak, was because Drew Holiday was able to play that Swiss Army knife role within this defense and really spread himself out through multiple positions. And it's just hard to put him lower than a B- or really anyone with in the starting lineup because of the production we saw from these guys, and we know what Drew is capable of. And I'm sure if we did these grades in about a month or two from now, the grades that we're giving Drew Holiday would be maybe will probably be a lot higher because of what he's capable of and the mentality he brings during playoff series. And it just kind of feels like this team was holding back at some points this season, like holding back from putting that full length effort to put in those scoring performances really stand out. Like Drew Holiday, we'd have to go through post-game records, but I don't think he got the player spotlight once this year, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think he did.
No, he did. He get against Miami.
Okay.
At Miami.
Right.
Yep.
At Miami,
So
right.
But I'm trying to think of another one, and
It's
I'm
tough.
blanking. He almost won the next game as well against the Nets, but we gave it to KP that night because he came back. I don't know if he had a double-double or not, but it's his return game from that 8-game absence. But Holiday, two good games in a row. One of them was player spotlight, the Miami and the Brooklyn game. But yeah, player spotlight outside of that, I don't know if he had another one all year. I mean, I was like Kristaps Porzingis. I missed the first 17 games, so I can't speak for the first 17 games, but for the next however many games, I that's the thing. Some of the guys, some of these players on here, all right. I was 100% expecting them to be on the player spotlight a lot more. That includes Drew Holiday. That includes Derek White. Now, Derek White, he ramped up a little bit there in February, I will say, but Drew Holiday, I mean, I would have loved to use him in some thumbnails, some player spotlight graphics a little bit more. I mean, he has a cool headshot, and it's like, his headband on, he's got his hair all done, and it's like, nope, can't use him. Got to use Hauser and Pritchard, who have like just base white guy look. It's like you just start you start your NBA 2K character, and it's just, oh, they gave me Sam Hauser. Oh, they gave me Peyton Pritchard. It's like, all right, go from there.
I'm pressing a guarantee button that we will be saying Drew Holiday's name throughout the playoffs more often than not. I guarantee there will be a game or two that he pulls out as the player spotlight, and if not, Justin Flowers. If we have to bring up our lovely sponsor Bucket Squad at some point during playoffs. We have to make a new segment, but I guarantee once we make that segment, Drew Holiday will be it.
You didn't press the button, but also,
I did.
Is that a charging platform?
It is.
I know, because I'm like, I swear I have the same one. I'm like, it's across the room. I just saw that.
Just real quick on Drew, one more thing for me. This year, to me, gives the 2021-2022 Al Horford vibes, where regular season-wise, he was there, he was present, he had some good games, but then the playoffs hit, and you're like, oh, okay, he was saving it, and he just took it to another level. I think that's why I agree, Franco. I think you see Drew Holiday come up big time for the Celtics at many different points this postseason. I think he was, Seamus, you said it too. He was coasting, and it was apparent. Like post All-Star break, there were a couple games where Drew was like, "Oh yeah, no, here I am," and you're like, "Whoa, like wait, hold on, like what? Like this is Milwaukee Bucks Drew. Like this is like what?"
The New York game the other night, it was like that night Drew Holiday was just like, oh, it's a big game at MSG. It's like, yeah, watch this, guys. I'm just going to come up with a couple steals, get us out in transition, make some awesome plays. It's like, yeah, that's the Drew Holiday we know. And in January against the Raptors and the Kings, it's like, that was not there. It's like, that was not there.
100%. And we saw the same thing with Al, who we'll get into shortly. But up next, we got Derek White. And D. White is interesting again. A couple of these guys are just tough because of that December. I mean, most of them because of that December, January section and portion. Derek White was MIA for like 2 months of this season. But like, if you were to wipe out that 2-month record, he had an A+ year. Because he was phenomenal in every other game at every other part of the season outside of December and January. That leads me to give an A-, because I understand you disappear for about 20 games. It's pretty rough. However, I didn't impact it as much from how good the other portion of the year was. Like, it was all-star outside of that 20 games. And for a player like Derek White, there were a lot of times this year where you had no Brown and you had no Porzingis, and he was your number 2. And I think that happened this year more than it didn't happen. And there were a lot of times over the last 25 games, you check the box score and it's like 18, 8, and 10. And you're just like, what? Like White managed to put together offensively just phenomenal games, and it got quiet. And like that's when you know in the NBA where it's like you're really hitting a different level. It's where you're just quietly doing like 18, 8, like 7 and 8, and you don't even realize it just because of how natural it comes. Derek White kind of got there at some point of the year. And then that's not like, can't not forget the defensive impact. He probably had an all defensive second or first team type of season. His versatility this year was phenomenal. His 2-man game with Tatum is like extremely underrated, I think. And I think that took a step this year. Statistically speaking, if we want to look at it from that standpoint, with Derek White, it was just as good, if not better than what he gave us last year. I mean, his scoring was up. His assists were barely down. His rebounding was up. His 3-point pretty much stayed. His field goal pretty much stayed. So he had a very good year this year. And I understand that you weird stretch of December and January, but I do think the good far outweighed the bad this year. And it really was just like a strict portion of red. And then both ends of the poll, I can't do the whole thing because my mic gets pulled away, was green. And it like wasn't like green yellow, or it wasn't green yellow 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 green like on a game by game basis. It was really a majority of the season just green outside of December and January. So A- for D White.
Yeah, I gave Derek White a B+ here. I gave Derek White a B+ because you kind of already mentioned it, that December to January run from Derek White, actually atrocious, actually horrendous from Derek White. And that was one of the more unexpected things to have happened this entire season out of everything that's happened with the Celtics team this year, which, again, they've just been the second seed all year. Like, looking back at the season now, actually grabbing the second seed after game 82, it's like, wow, we were really just in the second seed for the entire season after the first week, which we were in the first seed. But the entire year, what was the most surprising thing was that Derek White slumping in December and January, because not only was he slumping on the offensive end of the floor, defensively, Derek White was awful. He was horrendous. On defense on Christmas, the defensive breakdown, or really the play breakdown on Christmas, you can go back and watch it on our channel. It hones in on Derek White and his terrible performance on Christmas against the Sixers. And that was one of the more damning breakdowns all year. I mean, there was a couple of them. I mean, the second half in Oklahoma City, the Toronto game, the most notable ones. But that one too, I mean, with Derek White, that was actually horrendous back in December and January. The type of effort he was putting up on the defensive end of the floor. And I think some of the worst games for the Celtics team this year has been when Derek White is not bringing his intensity, his effort to the defensive end of the floor. And it's contagious. When Derek White is getting after it on defense, that kind of energy is going to be contagious. We know we have a couple of energy guys on the squad, but if Derek White isn't trying defensively, and he's one of your premier defenders, who else is going to be trying out there? The most notable game I remember Derek White also didn't look great in was that Mavericks game where the Celtics got blown out on the trade deadline day. Now, oddly enough, around that time, Derek White was starting to turn his game around a little bit into where we saw the rest of the season. But for a huge portion of the year, basically a third of the year, Derek White was just not the same player we've seen from the past. He was chucking up shots. He wasn't making the extra pass, wasn't penetrating the paint, wasn't taking floaters, wasn't taking layups, just all 3-pointers from his arsenal on the offensive end of the floor. And I already touched on the defensive side of the ball, but you have to give Derek White credit, and this is why I give him a B+ here, not a lower grade, is Derek White, he's a huge part of why the season turned around for the Celtics, and he was a huge part of why it didn't go right in that 25 game stretch where they went 14-11. However, when the Celtics did turn their season around, Derek White was a huge part of it because he was penetrating the paint, he was passing the ball, making the extra passes, he was putting pressure on defense, and he was putting defenses on their toes more often than not. He wasn't settling for shots. And a lot of the shots he did take came within the rhythm and the flow of the offense when he was wide open from the corner, wide open from the wing, from Jason Tatum playmaking, Jaylen Brown playmaking out on the floor. And that's when Derek White got his opportunities. And he was able to mesh a lot better in the second portion of the season than the first portion. And that was, again, a huge confusing point of why were the Celtics, why were they so cohesive last year? Why was their chemistry so high last year? Yet coming into this season, felt like they lost all of it. Well, they regained it back. Derek White was a huge part of that on the offensive end of the floor, and defensively, it felt like it was a theme with the entire team this year. Is after All-Star break, really, it was that portion of that 8 game stretch before All-Star break where the team went 7-1, and then after All-Star break where they just broke out a huge run. And it started not necessarily with this game, but that game against the Chicago Bulls where Kristaps Porzingis went off. Felt like the team had a different energy that night. Now there were a couple, there was that Rockets game as well, people like to point at. And there, there's kind of back and forth. That range right there, the Rockets, Bulls, somewhere around there. It was, I believe, early February. That's when we started to see things turn around. And that's when we started to see things turn around for Derek White as well from the defensive end of the floor. And it was just a theme with the entire team is when everyone is giving their effort and intensity. It is contagious. It's a contagious thing when Derek White or Drew Holiday, especially your two best defenders, they're giving their effort and their energy. It's a contagious thing. And it felt like, there were portions of the season where the entire team would wane defensively. And then there were other games where the entire team would show up defensively. I mean, I think about the games back to back. It was the Warriors game I believe it was a Monday, if I'm not mistaken, and then a Clippers game on a Wednesday on the West Coast. The team was playing phenomenally in Golden State. I remember Al Horford on Steph Curry that day. He was at another level defensively. He wanted to win that game on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And Al Horford and the rest of the team, they got after it defensively against the Warriors, yet the next game against the Clippers, it was the effort it wasn't exactly there out on the West Coast. And that was an overtime game against the lesser Clippers team. And it felt like the entire team from that defensive standpoint was kind of on and off, but Derek White had a huge deal in that because we all know how great he is defensively at his peak. And there just wasn't moments where we saw that the entirety of the year. I'm surprised actually at the end of the year that I'm giving him a B plus because there were definitely portions of the season where he's probably sitting at a D, at least a C. I mean, that's where I would have slotted him in back in December and January. Now I give him a B plus because he was a huge part of that Celtics turnaround. And he's played well throughout the rest of the season. Now he did go back to settling just a little bit near the end portion of the year, but I don't have any doubt in my mind that come playoff time, Derek White will be the player we saw mostly in the month of March, maybe at the end of February, a little bit there, and then April. Then his former self was back in December and January, where we saw a lot of shot chucking and a lot of just standing around on the defensive end of the floor. I think Derek White, those days, that's long gone.
It was like he was almost. I'm going with a B plus and kind of copy and paste a lot of the topics you had hit on, Seamus, were the ones I was going to bring up. But I think that he was really the median for this team. If you're looking at this team's success, you need to look at how Derek White was performing because during that inconsistent run, it seemed like Derek White and Drew Holiday were shells of themselves during that stretch. And I'm not sure what was the catalyst for that, what caused this team to really get to a point where Derek White is put on record saying, I'm not having fun anymore while being on the court. And to see that switchover happen was really symbolic of what Derek White was performing during those wins. Was when you started to feel the Celtics gain that energy back at that part of the season, you saw Derek White starting to get back those chase down blocks. You saw Derek White start to become an aggressive player again, attacking the lanes, putting up floaters, creating assists, and being able to capitalize on those kick out shots when he's the third or fourth option on the court, and being able to take advantage of the openings that the defense is giving him. We've seen Derek White really grow within that standpoint of being able to be a perfect backseat player to these guys. You see him being able to put up these numbers based on the success of the players around him and vice versa. But when you have to worry about guarding Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kristaps Porzingis, and Jrue Holiday and Derek White, someone's going to be the odd man out, and most of the time this season it's been kind of hard for teams to do so, and Derek White just being able to cash in on the top of the key and also creating his own shots, which is something kind of new to his game. When he takes the ball in isolation, he's been fantastic from that standpoint. So B plus is where I put him. Like I said, the starting lineup has done such a good job of mending itself, and I feel like this team kind of is getting those retake points with me. They came back after class and redid their questions, did the corrections. I'm trying to remember back to my high school days what I had to do when I was a 75 grade student, just across the board. But yeah, Derek White did the test corrections and brought back that intensity and that flair to his game just at the right time. So a B plus rolling into playoffs, and once again, he's another person that you can guarantee is going to only get better. That's a good thing that we can look at from just a generic standpoint of this team is we know this capable. Every single player on this team has another level that they can reach
right
compared to this regular season. So
right.
it's hard to. That's why we're kind of giving a little bit harder grading from that standpoint, just because the expectations are so much higher on this team.
They are. The next guy who expectations are probably going to rise in the postseason is Al Horford. Al, to me, not much to say. It's the Jrue Holiday category for me all over again. I went a little notch higher. I went with a C plus because I think his role got called upon more with Kristaps missing time. I thought he was really reliable this year. But I won't forget that stretch, December, January, and it creeped a little bit into February, where Al Horford couldn't knock down a shot, and he was virtually hurting Boston more than he was helping them being out there in a time where Boston was just playing terrible. Maybe C plus is a little harsh. I thought about a B, but it just didn't feel like a B season out of Al. Again, coasting, saving it. There were times this year, oh my God, Count Denver is the one that sticks out to me, where Al was just like, don't worry, guys. Like, when you need me, I'll be there. Like, don't worry. But when you're 38, you don't really have the luxury anymore can't bring it every night, because if you do, you'll fizzle out. And so again, Jrue, I gave a C because I think his impact was less day to day than Horford's was due to KP being out. Horford needed to bring it a little bit more than Jrue did, so I went C plus. And he really picked it up towards the back half of the year. A lot of these guys did, but I can't forget that just putrid. I mean, we talked about putrid. I mean, Al Horford was putrid in December. And unfortunately, with the coasting, you pair that up, you stack it about 2 months of bad basketball, it brings you right to a C plus.
I got a flat B here. Now I am actually going to revise my grade because of it. Initially, I had a B plus, but I have to go with the B here because realistically, Al Horford, you mentioned it, that December and January run was horrendous, particularly in December, where it was, I believe, 80% of his shots came from 3-point land, and he was shooting something like 26% from three. I mean, seriously, on the offensive end of the floor, he was posing as a legitimate negative for the Celtics offense. And then defensively, he wasn't necessarily making up for what he was doing terribly on the offensive end, on the defensive end of the floor. Yet, that being said, his season did turn around the way the rest some of these other guys did. The way Derek White's season turned around, the way Drew Holiday's season turned around down the stretch, and he did have some vintage Al Horford performances. Most notably, you mentioned against the Denver Nuggets just a couple weeks ago against the Memphis Grizzlies. That game down in Memphis, Al Horford randomly went off on a tangent of his own and became the player spotlight. But I also want to bring this to attention when it comes to Al Horford. Al Horford at 38 years old was pretty healthy this season. And yeah, there were a lot of moments where the Celtics put him on ice the way they would have done, and they did with Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday. But Al Horford, the way he was preserved and the way he played throughout this season, there was never a moment where we actually looked at Horford and went, "Oh no, oh he's got this injury. Is he going to be able to last?" Like with Al Horford, that's the thing. We've all talked about his availability come playoff time. Kristaps Porzingis is in. Kristaps Porzingis. First of all, let me confirm this as I was about to say this. Find out Kristaps Porzingis' age real quick. Okay, he's in his 20s, barely. He's turning 30 in like 100 days, like literally 110 days. Kristaps Porzingis in August, so August 2nd. But Kristaps Porzingis, he's in his 20s, barely, 29 years old. He is somebody that we talk about when his availability comes to question, right? In the playoffs, we go, well, Kristaps, is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be healthy? We ask that question all the time. And we say, oh, he has to be healthy. He's in his 20s. He's literally 9 years younger than Al Horford. We have legitimate injury concerns when it comes to Kristaps. He's a very fragile player. He's seen injuries in his past. I mean, we saw him miss the beginning of the season, as we were already talking about. With Al Horford, it's more theoretical. It's more hypothetical, right? Well, one of the two, whatever you want to call it. I guess it is theoretical. Theoretically, that could happen. Al Horford, it's more theoretical from him being not available in the playoffs or not giving you production in the playoffs because he's not healthy. It's more of a theoretical take because of his age. We're thinking, oh, well, he's 38. How much, how often is a 38-year-old going to be available? How often is a 38-year-old going to be able to produce for you at a high level? But Al Horford has basically shown us no signs of not being able to do so other than that beginning portion of the season, he didn't look particularly good. But then you look back and go, okay, was that a moment where he was coasting? And at that moment, he wasn't dealing with an injury. He was just playing terribly. There's never been a moment where Al Horford is legitimately injured, legitimately broken down to the point where we have concerns about his playoff availability. Yeah, that left big toe comes up on the injury report, but that's the butt of the joke here. That toe is completely fine, completely fine. And without Horford, that I'm telling you, it's been a whole can. We've seen a whole, like, those little like things on the hospital. It's like a whole bag of it, a whole bag coming off his toe. The pus.
Viewer discretion advised.
But for real, Al Horford, he's not broken down. It's a theoretical thing that he's not going to be available one day. It's like, oh, he's 38. He might not be available because he might break down. But he's never actually been broken down. Not once this whole season. So I have to give Al Horford a flat B here because for the goal of Al Horford this season, I mean, he met it. He had an above, I would say, from where his expectations came in this season. At the finish line of this regular season, I think he achieved an above expectations grade here for the entire year, and he stayed healthy. I mean, that's what we want to see. He played better than we thought he would the second half of the season, and he stayed healthy. And yes, he had that terrible December, but I mean, I would think at that point in time, you look back at Drew, Derek White, the entire team, they all had terrible months of December. The only two players that really had good months of December, it was Brown and Tatum. And Brown, there were some inconsistent moments in there, no doubt. I mean, he finished, that was the thing about December. Brown finished December off pretty well, so did Tatum. But the rest of the team, they were awful. And Brown, he had his moments in there. But talking about Horford, I think I have to give him a B. I kind of want to give him a bigger grade here, but that December was I mean, seriously, 80% of his shots from three, and it was a sub 30% 3-point shooting percentage. So I'm gonna give him a flat B here. I would argue could go a bigger score. I had him B plus to start out, but my revised grade it would be a B for Al Horford. That is.
Yeah, I went with a B minus for Al Horford this year. Once they get meeting in the middle, but I think that Al Horford. One common theme I've noticed during this report card episode is the fact that we keep on hitting on the fact that these guys were not exerting themselves to their fullest potential throughout the season, and a lot of these guys were just cruising, and we have now reached the point where pretty much the season begins for a lot of these players, and Al Horford is one of those guys that Drew Holiday and Al Horford could be Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets on the bench, just sitting there, just making fun of the young kids as they play during the regular season. And it wouldn't really make too much of a difference. I think the contributions these guys give you during the regular season will certainly take that weight off of players like Tatum and Brown, but both those guys have proven to us that they can manage to burden this much weight. They can manage to allow guys like Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford to take on and off nights. Allow Drew Holiday to play games that he doesn't really need to play that gritty, all defensive player of the year type of role that we've seen him play in the past. It's a benefit for this team because you're seeing this team roll into the playoffs with their shoulders back. There is absolutely no question marks. The only question mark right now is Jaylen Brown, which is kind of the thing that the team. It's not like the team forgot, but they did such a good job of conserving the guys you need to conserve. They forgot to worry about the guys that you've taken for granted health wise, like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Being able to have them out on the court as much as they did is great, but it also carries the risk of those guys getting injured. But Al Horford this season did everything that the Celtics asked for from him, being able to fill in those nights that Kristaps was out for the platoon swaps on back-to-backs. He was able to do his thing. Obviously, there was some streaky shooting during the stretch where this team was faltering back and forth from win and loss, but him being able to pick it up on the defensive end has been huge. There's obviously been some performances that almost reminded us of Atlanta Horford, Al Horford, Atlanta Al Horford, and I just think that it's an interesting conversation when we talk about this season. Heading into the season, we were wondering if this is going to be Al Horford's last year, and what the rate that he's playing at right now makes it very hard to say that this is would be his last year, but because there's obviously some juice left in the tank, but it just depends on if he's going to use that and head home, take the rest of the mileage home, just so he's healthy, or if he's gonna return. And if that's the case, what do the Celtics have to do to bring him back, or does he consider going to another team, which I don't think the Celtics can afford just because of the locker room presence he brings. And also, if he's also producing at this level next year, I could still see him going into next year as the backup big man and not faltering lower in the rotation.
Well, then, just in an interview for the national championship game, he said, "I can't wait to see Walter Clayton on the court next year." So he's hinted at a year 19 return. Big Al is
maybe on the C's. I'm just saying too. Maybe on the C's.
Hey, draft mock draft wise, that might work out. I don't know if they need Walter Clayton. Yeah, I don't know if you need a guy like Walter Clayton, but hey, Florida ties. bucket getter. You wouldn't hate that. Let's roll into their next guy, Peyton Pritchard. This is the highest grade I have. A+, and a flat out A+. And when you're looking at Pritch, when I was really looking at the statistical standpoint of Peyton Pritchard, what he did this season was pretty remarkable in terms of comparative to last year. He only played 6 more minutes per game, yet his averages jumped from 9 points to 14 points. I mean, he was significantly better scoring the basketball. He was still very efficient from behind the arc. He shot 40% from deep, guys. I mean, he was, again, you talk about almost 50, 40, 90 club. He was 47, 41 in 85%. So he teetered around there. The thing for me, we talk about the best ability is availability. Pritch played 80 games this year for the Celtics. 80. He was essentially every game this year. He was essentially playing it. And you had Peyton Pritchard, and he is probably going to be the write-in for 6th man of the year. I did not have that on my bingo card this year. Actually, you can catch me. But yes, I'll give you credit. I called you crazy. You can catch me saying back in September that Lonnie Walker was a better option than Peyton Pritchard off the bench. I said that. Hand up. I was so wrong. Pritchard, transformed himself in year 5 and took a step that I was not expecting. I won't say we, because some were expecting this. I was not. And you talk about Drew and the importance of maintaining Drew because he's getting up there in age now, 35, I believe. Pritchard stepped right in and said, don't worry, I got you. And he produced off the bench very well. 6th man of the year, like I said, 80 games played, 14 points a game, near 50, 40, 90. All of this brings me to an A+ with Pritchard. He was just, some of the plays he made, let's not forget that 40-point game he had, a 40-point double-double he had with 10 made threes alongside his running mate Derek White that night. I mean, he was just phenomenal this year. He made some ridiculous shots. He made some big-time plays down the stretch. And anything other than an A+ for me personally with Pritchard, because of my expectation was so low for him this year, wrongfully so maybe. Maybe I was too low on Pritch. But I had to give him my flowers now on this episode, on the roster report card. Peyton Pritchard, you shut me the hell up. A+, 6th man of the year. All my flowers go to you.
You're right.
Yes, you were right, Franco. I was wrong.
Clip that.
Well, like I was gonna say, we're gonna find this in the archives later. We got the archive playlist going. Well, we got to find that. I believe it's one of those Abu Dhabi games.
It is.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll have to go find that. But in anything other than an A+ for Peyton Pritchard right here would just be absolute robbery. I mean, teacher, you're gonna have a parent-teacher meeting with whoever, because my goodness, Peyton Pritchard, looking at what he did off the bench this season, he literally is about to win the MVP award out of all the bench players, right? If you were to culminate an MVP award from the bench, Peyton Pritchard is that guy this season. 6th man of the year. That's what that award is, taking all the bench players and putting them into a category of who is the most valuable bench player. This year, it was Peyton Pritchard. And I'm going to say this right now, too. The Celtics, see on the bottom of the screen, 61 wins this season. If Peyton Pritchard does not play the way he does this season, there is no way the Celtics have 61 wins right now. No way. And I'll say this too, they would have been embarrassed even further in the NBA Cup, because that game against Chicago, I don't want to say that was Pritchard's coming out party game, but that night in Chicago, Peyton Pritchard saved the game in the 4th quarter, replaced Drew Holiday in the lineup, and saved the game. There were a couple games like that from Peyton Pritchard this year. And even the way he finished out there, terrible game in Orlando the other night. However, he follows it up with that performance on Sunday against the Hornets, scores 34 points on efficient shooting, 14 of 25 from the floor. And we know that's a nothing game in the scheduled game 82. However, we said after that game yesterday, we want to see the regular contributors play well in the moments in which the spotlight is for themselves when they get the spotlight. And Peyton Pritchard, he's consistently the player who does that. When he has more opportunities on this roster, he's always making the most of them. And he's easily, this entire Celtics roster is confident. However, Pritchard and he might be the most confident of the entire bunch. I mean, considering he's basically 6 foot tall out there. Pritchard is a short guy, and he gets after it on the defensive end of the floor. Offensively, he is not afraid to challenge anybody. I mean, anytime he gets the ball, he's looking to make a play, looking to make a shot. He's super aggressive, and off the bench for the Celtics, I mean, this is easily the most. He is. I know we have most valuable player, Jokic, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. We have one on our own team, Jason Tatum, talking about Giannis. But in terms of contract and what a player brings to a team on a basketball floor, Peyton Pritchard is easily one of the most valuable players in all of the NBA.
I am
$6.7
so
million.
happy you brought this up. Oh my God. If you could I just throw a quick stat out there really quick?
Go ahead. 100%.
Really quick. Oh, I'm so happy you went there. Peyton Pritchard, I want to get a little advanced analytically on you, right? Advanced analytics here. Peyton Pritchard's win share per 48 minutes, right? Which a league average is right around 0.100. He came in at 0.183. Now, in contrast, right? So essentially, for those of you who don't know, it's an estimate of the number of wins contributed by a player per 48 minutes, right? Again, league average is 0.100. Jason Tatum, who we said he's in the MVP conversation, slotting at third, had a 0.174. Peyton Pritchard had a higher win share per 48 minutes, just as high as Jason Tatum. Seamus, like yes.
And he's making what? I mean, 30 million dollars less than Tatum this year. I mean, that's seriously some of the production. I mean, I see on the bottom of the screen we have all the salaries out of the bottom.
6.4, I believe.
So yeah, I mean that would basically be like what, 28, somewhere around there. Basically $30 million less than Jason Tatum to be nearly as valuable from an analytical perspective. Now we know from their ability out on the floor what they can each do, but Peyton Pritchard in the lineup this season, he's been super valuable for the Celtics, has brought the Celtics multiple wins this season, and he's doing so on what is essentially a veteran minimum contract. And I mean a little bit above a veteran minimum contract, but that's basically where he's slotted in within his salary. And the Celtics, just some of their production off the bench, period. I mean, you see some of the salaries going by now. I mean, Sam Hauser, Luke Cornett, those guys are literally making minimums, and they're huge parts of the rotation. Peyton Pritchard is in that group as well. Without Peyton Pritchard this season, I really don't know where the Celtics season would be, because no Pritchard means you basically have no bench help. I mean, yes, you have Al Horford off the bench, but he's more that, you're kind of platooning with Kristaps Porzingis, and he's part of the big man rotation. It's very different with ball handlers and forwards and wings, versatile players who can defend and score the ball. Peyton Pritchard, he has been a huge boost to the Celtics squad, just from the standpoint of, if Pritchard was not coming off the bench, there would be no bench help for the Boston Celtics after the starting lineup. And yeah, we'd be having more of the conversation of potentially moving a player down to the bench to give the bench more production if that were the way the season were to have turned out. But Pritchard, I mean, this is another player too. We talked about Jason Tatum developing, coming into this season, getting better. Pritchard 100% got better coming into this season, and it's another great story within Celtics history. We've talked about Luke Cornett and his great story, but Pritchard has a great story as well. Drafted 26th overall out of Oregon. Danny Ainge drafts him, because I'm sure Danny Ainge, if you go back and look at the 1980, we just plug here. We just interviewed Dan Shaughnessy a couple weeks ago. Everybody go check that out. Still go run up that view count. But after interviewed Dan Shaughnessy, I'm like, I got to go back and watch all these 80 games, right? Like, if all these games from the 1980s, I just got to go back and watch all of them and experience all these moments, right? Which, not that in the past, it's like you have your memories in the past, but once you hear from an old timer, you're like, you got to go back and revise history. And through that history, something that came up time and time again was how much of a hound dog Danny Ainge was on the basketball floor. It was ridiculous, the effort Danny Ainge was giving. He was picking up full court. I mean, he was half court. He was putting pressure on the ball at all times of the game. And he's just, typical scrappy defensive player. And I'm sure that when Danny Ainge went to go scout Peyton Pritchard, he saw the same thing within Pritch. He saw 100% that hound dog, that mentality of you're giving everything on the basketball floor. You love to be out here and you're doing anything to help the team win. He saw that within Peyton Pritchard. He drafts him 26th overall over Desmond Bain, over all these other players that we look back on. Well, this player, whatever. Right? It doesn't matter today now, considering where Peyton Pritchard is. But drafted 26th overall. Rookie year has a phenomenal rookie year with the 500 club, and it's because he had a lot of opportunity on that team. I mean, that team was rolling out lineups of Grant Williams, Shimmy Ojale, Romeo Langford. It was a complete mess. Tristan Thompson that year, Jeff Teague for half of that season. But Pritchard got a lot of run on that in that squad, and we thought, oh, there's something here in Pritchard, something for the future. But by 21-22, Pritchard, the role he found in Ime Udoka's squad was kind of that spark plug at the beginning of the fourth. He would come in at the beginning of the fourth, get his minutes in, make a couple of shots, get the offense rejuvenated, and that would be Pritchard's role. And he would play 10, 15 minutes a night. He wouldn't really play all that often. The next season, he's completely buried behind a lineup of all guards: Malcolm Brogdon, Marcus Smart, Derek White, all of those players. Peyton Pritchard found himself behind. And he, of course, requested a trade after that season. And we all know the history. The Celtics instead traded Marcus Smart and Malcolm Brogdon, didn't trade Pritchard. And last season, he is not anywhere. Last season, he is not anywhere near the player he is this year, coming off the bench for this Celtics team. And the fact that Pritchard has been able to build up his standing within the organization to become now what is going to be a certified unanimous sixth man of the year, potentially unanimous. I don't want to say it's going to be exactly that, but I'm sure some other guys will get some votes. But Pritchard, he's going to win that award. I mean, he's been favored all season. He's going to win that award by a landslide. And the fact that he's made it to this point, it's beyond where we thought he could ever go. And he's just been doing that time and time again this season with his performances. And now he's going to do it with an award. And there's no other grade you can give Peyton Pritchard here other than an A+. I mean, you can't give him anything lower. And Franco, I know you're next, but I mean, if you give him anything lower, we're going to have to come. I mean, we're going to have to leave the camera and we're going to have to. The parent-teacher meeting is going to be in session.
Yeah.
Obviously, I went with the A+, and Tatum and Pritchard were the two players I went with. My A+, gave my hundreds to for the season, just due to the pure fact of living up to expectations and overcoming expectations. I feel like those are the two players that kind of shocked people. Obviously, Tatum wasn't too much of a shocker to people. It's just the fact that he's continued to gradually improve in his game. But looking at Peyton Pritchard, let's go back to last year's playoff run and NBA championship. You have this kid who's just drilling half-court shot after half-court shot. You got former players like Park saying, "Who the hell is this 6'1" white boy?" Starting to do their research on him, trying to figure out who he is, and from there on, you saw him take on that attention and shine upon it. And this year, you saw a lot more attributes to his game that were kind of buried in the limited minutes that he received in years prior, which were the intensity that he brought on the defensive end and how much of a on-ball presence he is. One thing that was a highlight for the Celtics was looking at the strengths and weaknesses of this team, where once you put in that bench rotation, what's going to happen on the defensive end? Teams are going to target Pritchard. Teams are going to target Hauser. Both of those players were able to step up and were actually able, to surprise a few matchups from time to time. And there were so many games and so many points at this season where the Celtics would be in a game that the shot isn't falling, and that was more of a habit than last year. Was this team starting off to a cold start, and what would completely jump that team and energize that team was right when Peyton Pritchard would come off the bench. And countless times that we saw that he would make the first shot and then everything else would fall into place. It's almost like he had the key to the rim and would just unlock the hoop for everyone else to be able to score. And also, not just being that isolation scoring player that we've been praising him for, the absolutely immaculate shot creating ability that he's displayed during the Sixth Man of the Year run, is the way he's been able to fill into other smaller roles on this team. If you're looking for a player to get down low and get a rebound, it's been Peyton Pritchard. Every time that you've seen one of those the ball knocked out of the hands of Luke Cornett or Namias Keita during the game and they're swatting it out to the corner, the first one there sprinting to that ball is Peyton Pritchard. And you've seen him be that player that's gotten a lot of those second chance rebounds on the offensive end and been able to capitalize upon that. And that's just the effort and mentality ordeal when it comes to this team. And Pritchard's really taken on that role of being the sixth man slash spark plug for this team. And I hesitate when I say the word spark plug because I kind of feel like I've overused that phrase a little bit when it comes to him, and I feel like he's outgrown that phrase more than me overusing it. He's become so much more than that. In the fact that you saw in last night's game against the Charlotte Hornets, obviously against former assistant coach of the Boston Celtics, Charles Lee, who is now the head of the Charlotte Hornets. You saw the Charlotte Hornets game plan for Peyton Pritchard. There were times that we've heard teams mention the fact that Peyton Pritchard is on their whiteboard as a player to focus in on. The Charlotte Hornets ran a box
Doc
and one
Rivers.
against
You heard that from Doc Rivers.
Yeah.
This is where we got to get the screenshot out of Doc Rivers on his knees earlier this season. That was one of the Peyton Pritchard breakout games for
I
sure.
forgot about that.
It was like fourth game of the year.
I was trying to remember who it
yeah.
was, but who else but Doc Rivers. At least he was able to clean up his act, and who knows what they can do during the playoffs. But yeah, I hate to say that I saw this coming for Peyton Pritchard, but I love to say it at the same time.
Right. Let me add this in about Peyton Pritchard as well. So from a 2s to 3s perspective from Pritchard, right? So he took 3.1 2-point attempts last year, all right? 3.1. This year he took 3. All right? So basically the same, 3.1, 3 attempts a game. From 2. All right? From 2. Keep those numbers in mind, 3.1 and 3. Last year from 3, he took 4.7 attempts from 3. Okay? Shot 38.5%. This season, he took 7.8 attempts from 3. So up 3.1 attempts from last season, and he shot 40.7% from 3. So he took 3 more attempts from 3 per game. He still took the same amount of 2s. So last season and this season, from a 2s perspective, took the same amount. Took 3 more 3s this season, took on that responsibility within the Celtics offense, and hit at a percentage 2 percentage points higher, hit at a clip 2 percentage points higher than last season, 40.7 versus 38.5. So that's 2.2% better from 3 last season, and he's taking 3 more attempts. I mean, Peyton Pritchard, we have to remind ourselves too, 27 years old this season, now just getting into his prime, still was kind of a young guy coming into the league the last couple of years. You know, a multi-year college guy, came in a little older at 23 years old, 22, 23 years old. Now he's 27 years old. He's starting, and I would say, Franco, you said it perfectly. He's more than a spark plug type of player now. He's going to be the 6th man of the year, but he is that cornerstone bench piece for the Celtics who comes off the bench and provides an actual contribution from the team other than just sparking up a few runs here and there throughout a game. I mean, he was the spark plug back on last year's team, the year before, and the year before that, mostly 21-22 with that Udoka team. But you think some of the sixth men throughout the years. Now, Smart, he started near the end of his career, but he was that sixth man at one point in time, and that's it. That's where it feels like Peyton Pritchard is. It feels like he's in that Marcus Smart role now, where he is that staple of the franchise, but he's not necessarily, he's not an all-star player. Although I will say there were all-star moments from Pritchard this season, but he's not going to be, your one of your pillars. But he's certainly going to be one off the bench for this Celtics club, and what's the kind of season Peyton Pritchard had? We're talking about grades here. He could not have done anything more to impress us than what he did, because, he's going to win MVP out of all the bench guys in the NBA. Literally out of every single bench player in the NBA, Peyton Pritchard, he's walking away with the MVP, the most valuable bench player in the NBA. Peyton Pritchard is walking away with that award, and just what he was able to do this season, it's absolutely phenomenal. He's gone way beyond a spark plug to a cornerstone bench piece that the Celtics, they're going to have around for at least up until the end of his contract is over, which is in another 2-3 years still from now, and they're paying him great money.
Earlier in the show, I said you might see some weird gradings, right? Some of the other guys had higher grades on some core pieces. It's funny because a lot of these guys on the team, when you think of the Boston Celtics in the social sphere of the basketball world, it's like, oh yeah, well, of course they got 60 wins, man. They're stacked. They have Tatum, they have Brown, they have Porzingis, they have Holiday, they have White, and then it stops. But no, this 60-win season was built, in my eyes, off of Jason Tatum, some of those other starters giving you some big games in the lineup, right? In the bench, in the next bench piece, and the reason I said that, I said there was two players, it's Luke Kornet. Peyton Pritchard and Luke Kornet are two pieces to this Boston Celtics club that were the catalysts for them winning 60 games this year. What? Like, excuse me? So to get into how? Then to get into Luke Kornet's grade, I give him an A, a flat A. I almost knocked my water bottle from how excited I got on Luke Kornet. Again, God, I talk about being wrong. Every time I bring up Luke Kornet, it's like, God, you're wrong. But Luke, talk about the perfect fit. Luke Kornet, I don't know if anybody plays their role better than Luke Kornet plays his role in the Boston Celtics, because he plays it to perfection. The diving ability, the rim running, somehow that he brings, the fact that he brings the second chance opportunity he brings, the pressure on a defense. I'm sorry, quick check. Am I good here?
You made it through. You survived.
Oh God. I can tell the inevitable about to happen, but the impact, the pressure he puts. Gosh, Wi-Fi, you're throwing me off my game now. Come on, the pressure he puts on a defense from a high pick and roll standpoint is very underrated. So Luke Kornet, A, really, he played his role super well. He had a huge impact. You talk about guys like Kristaps being out and Porzingis being out, those two guys platooning. He stepped up many, many times. He had a lot of availability this season for the most part, and he was huge. Luke Kornet, solid A, well earned. And yet again, I owe you an apology, Luke. This year on the roster report card, I gave you some credit last year. You're getting my flowers again. Great season.
He has to get an A+ from me. Luke Kornet went from a player we're talking about going, we'll be able to re-sign him on the minimum if we want him back or not. We'll pick and choose with Luke Kornet. To, he might actually walk this summer because the Celtics might not be able to pay him what he demands on the market. That's where Luke Kornet is right now. Now, I will say, new CBA rules in place, new cap rule. I've looked at a couple of players, and I guess Rob, he might be, I don't know if he's frozen for you or gone, but he's both on mine. He's frozen one place, gone in the other place. But just speaking on Luke Kornet real quick, Kornet, we thought he was gonna be just a player that we could hang around. We could hang around with. Like, okay, yeah, we could re-sign him on the minimum. Wouldn't matter, pick and choose. Now he's a player who might get paid. Now, I will say, this summer we could see some ramifications of the new CBA rules and players getting priced out of their real ranges. I mean, we saw that happen with Lonnie Walker last year. He had a phenomenal 23-24 season in Brooklyn, deserved a payday 100%, and teams wanted him. Lonnie Walker was a wanted player by multiple teams, but no teams really had the cap space to sign Lonnie Walker. And he went over to Europe, and we know how that story all unfolded. But now, looking at next season, that could happen with Luke Cornett. Could be priced out, could be back with the Celtics on a minimum yet again. However, he might demand a payday this summer, and it's because of what he's been able to do within the Celtics lineup. And I just continue to say it. He's in the best shape of his career, Luke Cornett is. And the athleticism that he brings to the floor, it's a lot more athletic than when he came in to the Celtics organization back in 21. And we've talked about this aspect of his game a lot as well, where he came into the Celtics organization as a 3-point specialist, a pick and pop big man. And now he doesn't take threes, even in games where we're just chucking threes all over the place. Luke Cornett does not take 3-pointers. He just does not. He is an around the rim big guy, and he's somebody that thrives off of putback opportunities, rim runs to the rim where he's runs to the rim where he's catching lobs. And like I said, he's I don't know. Is Rob? What I can't tell what's going on with Rob right now. If he's frozen or if he's back or what's going on here. But Luke Cornett going towards the rim, somebody that thrives off putback opportunities, thrives off rim runs, catching lobs, and just the rebounding aspect. He's one of the best offensive rebounding bigs in the league. He brings just a whole new level to the rebounding aspect of the Celtics bench, and the player he's been able to turn into. He's just another player on the Celtics roster who does every little thing correctly, every single little thing correctly on the floor for the season. They have a couple of those players on their roster right now, and when we mention them when it comes to the stars, but Luke Cornett is one off the bench that comes to mind when talking about how great the Celtics have been from that perspective this year. Now, just getting the proper layout here. There we go. Let's get the green strip there out of the middle.
We got Rob back.
But we got what? Okay.
For everybody watching this podcast right now, this is. Can you hear me? First of all, am I?
Yes.
You're coming across. We got you for a couple seconds.
Okay, so if you keep seeing me pop off and on, it's because long story, Seamus, just keep it going. I don't want to kill this.
I'll turn it over to Franco. Franco, what do you have for a grade for Luke Cornett?
Well, I feel like I was gonna be ducking wrenches in dodgeballs if I said my first grade, which was going to be a
hold on, whoa. Yeah, don't go back. I want to hear your grade. Don't change your answer now. I want to hear what you have to say. Hold up.
It was gonna be a B+. But
okay.
Stand
true. Don't stand true. Stand on it. Let me hear why you have Luke Cornett at B+, and then you can tell me why it changed. But first, I want to hear why you had it at a B+ originally coming in.
I had it at a B+ because I thought I was grading him incredibly high with that, and I was basing it on like a same team like a team board. Like when I was going through the grades, I thought everyone was going to be graded, but looking at individual performances and looking at it the way that we have been for the rest of the show, and looking at it just with the microscope put down on Luke Cornett, it's hard to go below anything less than an A when I come from that standpoint. But yeah, just the huge step up that he had. We were still having conversations. One of the reasons I kept it at a B+ in the beginning was because of the team standpoint, and it was during the beginning of the season. Those question marks were still there on who this backup big man's going to be. Obviously, Al Horford is the de facto backup big man behind Kristaps, but knowing how this team was going through injuries, we really needed one of these guys, either Cornett, Keita, or Tillman, to step up. And it was up in the air for a little bit, and when the season was first starting off, and this team didn't have Kristaps Porzingis on the court, who was going to step up and fill those minutes. And over the season, you saw Cornett gradually win that role more and more from Caires. There were a couple times that this point where we've debated on this program, is it going to be Cornet or Caires? Obviously, time has changed since then. And you just saw Cornet playing with a different level of comfort on the court that Caires or Tillman was never able to reach this season. You see Cornet really filling into this team as such a viable big man and just having the positioning down. You don't see him playing out of place. And you also see a slight versatility in his game when it comes to the defensive end and on the offensive end, which is weird to say when you're talking about Cornet when you're talking about a true center who his main role is to be a pick and roll player with this team and being another body down low, but he's just became so much more than that when it comes to positioning on the court. He's done such a good job of being aware of where the ball, where his teammates want to go with the ball, and being on the opposite side of the rim to get those easy lobs, those easy putbacks, and just another energy that he has brought to this team. I'm sure we've talked about Pritchard, Brown, and Fournette, but you really have a perfect storm of characters on this team when it comes to a locker room, and it's really hard to see this team in a different scenario. And like I said, this is, well, I'll repeat myself until I'm blue in the face, that we need to enjoy this roster as long as we can, because we really don't know if we're going to have the same group of guys like we did last year. We are so thankfully lucky to only be
We heard
missing
Seamus
a
talking
few
about
players.
that. I see Seamus.
But yeah, we're thankfully lucky that the only two players we really lost last offseason were O'Shea Brissett, LeVar Stevens, or not even LeVar Stevens, O'Shea Brissett, and Savi Mikhailu, and they were able to replace them almost seamlessly with Torrey Craig and um, Shireman, which we'll talk about later on in this show. But Fournette just being that character for this team, I think that in 10 years, him and Scal are going to be perfect on a post-game show together once he retires and hangs up the basketball shoes and puts on the microphone, because there's no reason why Luke Cornett should not be on national television. I would compare him to the NBA's version of Jameis Winston, a complete player who just is a boatload of personality and can also bring some production to a team. And that's the best way to describe Luke Cornett at this point. And like I said, it's going to be hard for this team to keep either either or Horford or Cornett. And there's a case to be made that you might need to make some roster adjustments to keep either one of those guys on this team, because both those guys just hold such imperative roles within this locker room and on the court.
Well, sorry, I brought this graphic up a little bit early because my finger slipped here. But Luke Cornett, we have some of these still in the stream. Just giving a quick shout out to the end of the season character of Luke Cornett right now, because I mean, come on, he's a man of the people, hard hats. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be in the broadcast booth after his career. I think he's going to be out on the streets building homes. That's what Luke Cornett is going to do. He's going to be building homes out there. We all know this. Oh, and Rob disappeared. Oh, well, I guess should we move on to the next player then, Franco? Oh, yeah. There's our 5-man. Just in case if 5 people want to come in here right now and join us, that's what we got going on there. But our next player here. Now, this player, I'd be very interested to see what Rob has to say about this player, because I was back and forth on this grade. and I wasn't necessarily. I downgraded him during this stream. I will say I was kind of going over my list. I'm going. I downgraded this player, and it is Sam Hauser. Now I started him with a C, but I downgraded him to a C minus. Now the reason that Sam Hauser, I think, if you really look at Sam Hauser's season in its entirety, most of this year was not good for Sam Hauser. We were talking about Sam Hauser getting cooked defensively against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that's the main reason why we lost that fourth game against the Cavs. We talked about, could Shireman, Walsh, Torrey Craig, could any of them replace Sam Hauser within the playoff rotation? Because the Celtics just have not been getting the production out of Sam Hauser all season. That's from a defensive standpoint, but offensively, Sam Hauser could not get 3-point shots to fall earlier this year. But the reason I put him at a C minus and not a flat out D is you look at his 3-point percentage, it sits at 41% right now. Sam Hauser at the end of the year ended up being a above 40% 3-point shooter. And Sam Hauser, let me just go to this real quick. So Sam Hauser on the year, he shot 41.6%, which is the best mark on the Celtics, just over Kristaps Porzingis, who shot 41.2%. But Hauser, 41.6% on the year, 5.6 attempts. And you look at that and go, that's actually a pretty good season for a shooter of his magnitude, especially on that volume and where he's slotting in on the rotation. Sam Hauser, from an analytical standpoint, had an all right season, at least shooting the ball. But we know throughout the year, wasn't necessarily shooting at a high clip, had a lot of rough games in there, and defensively took a step back from where we saw him last year. That's why I have to give him a C minus here. The shooting got better as the year went on. Certainly, you could say the last 15 to 20 games of the season was a lot better than what the season started out as for Hauser, but there was still a big 40, 50, 60 game sample size in there of Hauser just not being the same player in which he was last year, and us talking about replacing his rotation spot. So I have Sam Hauser at a C minus right here, even though he's been ramping up near the back half of the season, been shooting a lot better, and even ended the season with a 41.6% 3-point percentage, best on the Celtics, shooting 5.6 attempts per game. I got to give him a C minus though here. What do you give Sam Hauser, Franco?
I went with a C plus for Sam Hauser, a little bit more generous. I will say this: it is very, very hard for me to grade this team terribly hard and give these guys any grades that don't reflect on where this team is from a success standpoint. And if this team were balancing within 500 right now, I could understand some grades being down around the C minuses, the D pluses, the D even lower. But when you're talking about a team that's 61-21 on a regular season, we would be nitpicking to really say these guys had a bad season from an independent standpoint. Obviously, there's some performances that we would want to see better out of these guys, but Sam Hauser, I think it gave us exactly what we would expect to get out of Sam Hauser, and then some a little at some points. Obviously, Sam Hauser is one of those players that has ever been regarded as a well-rounded player. As when I was talking about Peyton Pritchard and the outlook on the Celtics team from a strengths and weaknesses standpoint, you would look at Pritchard and Hauser and be picking them apart all day. And the fact that Hauser has been able to step up on the defensive end at some points, obviously still not the greatest defender in the world, wouldn't stick him on a general NBA starter for an entire 25, 30 minutes and expect there to be haltage in their results. But he can go out there and still keep a hand in a face of a player, and all you really need from Sam Hauser is those 5 to 10 minute stretches during a game, and it could come in one rotation or it could come in 3 or 4 throughout a game, and he's just sprinkled in, and he'll just be able to make 4 3-pointers within a 4 to 5 minute stretch, and that just sets this team so much further apart. One of the things that we wanted to see more of is that versatility in scoring, which has started to shine a little bit more throughout this season. And bringing in Torrey Craig is definitely a good backup option to having Sam Hauser as their backup wing coming off the bench. I, I'm just really kind of hoping to see what we already know what we can get out of Hauser, but just the fact that the Celtics have been able to get it out of him and it hasn't hindered this team in any standpoints, really. And it's hard to say that you can get anything else at the value that you have them at. Likewise with players like Pritchard. Likewise with players with Fournette. When you look at the Celtics bench, they're valuable, and their value is within their financial value. You are not going to find many teams that are having guys that are making sub $5 million a year, sub $6 million a year, and contributing at the level that we've seen Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard, and Luke Fournette have. But obviously, Fournette still remained within that role player category, unlike a player like Pritchard. But the fact that they are so good at playing their roles at consistent stretches, especially heading into the playoffs, has me feeling extremely good about this team.
And our next player is also a part of that category you talk about as well, where all these the players you were just talking about, Hauser, Cornette, and Peyton Pritchard, those players are of an elite status when it comes to players who are playing on near minimums, producing at what is really a $10+ million production for the Celtics team. But this player is also on that list too. Maybe not at the same level of those other three players, but he's certainly eloped within that conversation. Neemias Queta. Now, this one could be interesting as well because Queta, there's been some mixed reviews on Queta throughout the season, and this again goes along with the conversation of expectations coming into the year versus what actually happened. Now, I give Queta a flat out B this season. I give him a flat out B, and the reason why is, well, number one, he didn't have a phenomenal year, so I don't think I can give him an A. It wasn't like he was a world beater for the Celtics off the bench and doing everything at the most optimal of his skill level for the basketball team. That being said, you look at the games played for Neemias Queta on the season, 62 games. Okay, 62 games played on the season, and that is his career high. So previously, this is Queta's games played, game log here. Season 1 with the Kings, 15 games. All right, season 2, 5 games. All right, so the first 2 seasons of his NBA career, only 20 games played, and that's not because he's injured. That's because he's basically a two-way player. They're playing him few and far between, and once in a blue moon, the Sacramento Kings were. Comes to Boston, 28 games played last year. That surprises me a little bit. Felt like the Celtics used him a little bit more than 28 games last season, but only 28 games played. This season coming in, the Celtics and Joe Mazzulla used Queta early on and went away from him for a while. But throughout the season, he was clearly that fourth big man. It was Porzingis, it was Horford. Cornette slotted himself in as the premier third big man in the roster, on the roster, in the rotation. Meanwhile, Queta was that fourth big guy in front of Tillman. Queta was used in more important spots than Xavier Tillman this season, and that's just point blank. And we've seen that in multiple settings in games this past regular season where Queta comes in ahead of Tillman and makes an impact. And he's obviously a different player than Tillman in the play styles, but Queta, he did come into the rotation, and he did 62 times this season. Queta did 62 games played, started 6 games, so started for the first time in his career for 6 games. Now, some of those were probably, some heavy rest nights for the Celtics, but regardless, Queta came in and had his first real NBA run. Now, the seasons prior, it's not as if, he wasn't practicing with NBA teams in the NBA environment, but 15 games year 1, 5 year 2, 28 year 3. That's not too much of a run whatsoever. That's 48 games in 3 seasons. That's not a whole lot for Keita yet this season surpasses all of the games, right? The number of games he played the last 3 years before this past season surpasses it with the number of games he played this year, which is 62. And that has to be a big thing for me here is the fact he was available, he was healthy, because we talked about the big man rotation. Porzingis, Horford, they're going to rest, they're going to sit. Porzingis is going to be injured time to time, and when you have that rotation the way you do, if you're the Celtics, Keita, he stayed healthy. He was not a part of the injured cast of the team, which thankfully there was no real part of an injured cast of the team. But he also played 62 games in the rotation, and I thought he performed to a higher level than we thought he would. Now, was he the best big in the world? Absolutely not. Okay, we saw his flaws out there, just some of the defensive positioning, his ability to defend the perimeter, and throughout the year, certain teams would kind of pick him apart on the defensive end of the floor from an offensive standpoint on their side, of the opponent's side. But Keita, what he was able to contribute to the Celtics this year, it deserves a B for me. I'm not going to give him an A. It feels a little, it feels wrong to go a little lower than that for me, just because I think he had a season where in 62 games played, I think he overachieved on his expectations. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Franco.
What did I would have to pull up one of my old report cards, and when they used to have like a little rubric for the parents that would say what each letter grade meant, and I want to say that's what I was basing this off of, and I gave Namias Keita a C, because a C, or floating around a C plus, because of the fact that he was able to meet my expectations for him, and there were a few games that he was standing out and showed the raw potential that he has. And if there was a word to describe Namias Keita's game right now, it is raw. It's a lot of fouls that don't need to happen in plays that are later on in the game. You see him getting himself called up in things that the ref will go over to him and explain why it's a foul to him. You'll see times that on the offensive or defensive end, he's out of position, getting dragged out of the paint completely by the guard, and just to see what he is capable of when he does have those good plays where he is put into the right position and can show off the athleticism that he plays with. It seems like he would be the clear-cut backup center if Luke Cornett wasn't here, and that was kind of one thing that I would bring up in our discussions when we were having those big man controversies in the early middle part of the season, where if Keita can figure out how to flow within this offense and where to be positioned and where he can contribute when the ball isn't within his hands, he will be able to set himself apart. And you look at next year, obviously, I'm looking past. I'm not looking past the playoffs, but I just have one eye around the corner, and if the scenario where you end up losing Luke Cornett and Al Horford comes around, Namias Keita is still that center that's still on contract, and I still believe that the developmental value behind Namias Keita is something that could bolster him to a rotational level player in the next year or so within his career. And this was kind of the first year you saw him take that uh, corner, and I just think that he's still young within his career, and we haven't seen the best of Namias Keita yet. So that's why I'm sticking with the C plus for this season.
So wait, C plus, C plus.
Yeah,
you gave him a flat out C at the beginning, so.
Well, I said C plus plus. It's like he got like a 67. on my
Isn't that like
the
a D?
numerical thing.
Not like a
No,
D?
where are they teaching it?
67? Isn't that like a D? Like a 65 is an F. Like,
No, I'm
I'm pretty
sorry,
sure like a
76. No, 76. Like, all right, yeah,
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 it would be like like upper 70s maybe.
yeah, mid low, middle higher 70s for data for this year.
It's like crazy looking back at, the grading system for school. It's like, man, 65%, that's a really good shooting line in the NBA. And at school, it's just you get an F. That's just what it is. That's just what
No,
it is.
that's a D, and then if once you break below 60, that's an F. 60 is a D.
I don't know how they do it in Massachusetts. Illinois, I guess Illinois, we got, do we have better standards, educational standards? I don't know. But talking about a player who came from the Midwest, at least from his college days where he played at Creighton and South Dakota State, Baylor Shireman. Now, this grade would have been a little rough a couple weeks ago, but at the end of the year, I think it certainly turned around. Now, I'm giving Shireman a B plus here because what he was able to do at the end of the year, I think he did earn himself some minutes potentially come playoff time. Will we see him out there in the playoffs a ton? Absolutely not. But could we see him in 8-minute stretches and 10-minute stretches here or there? 100% come playoff time because Baylor Shireman earned that in the latter half of the season, specifically the last 20, 25 games of the year, where Joe Mazzulla just started throwing him into the lineup and he started producing, whether it was as a shooter on the offensive end of the floor, defensively, he was getting after it there. We saw his passing ability on the offensive end, and he just looked comfortable with the ball and in the Celtics system, period. We've seen players come in like Jordan Walsh. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but other guys that come in, they're not too comfortable with the A team. They're just not. Whereas Baylor Shireman, he comes in, plays with the starters, coming all the way down from Maine, and he looks phenomenal the last 20 games of the season in his role. And there was a rough shooting game there at the end, but every other game was, I mean, he was shooting at a high percentage in all of these games. And I think Baylor Shireman earned himself some playoff rotation minutes at the end of this season and certainly showed us something going into next year and what kind of role he could potentially play next year. Baylor Shireman, I mentioned this earlier in the season when we were talking about Shireman. The Celtics utilized a first round pick on Shireman. They utilized real cap space on Shireman when it comes to signing him to a deal. They had to sign him to a deal. Every first round pick is guaranteed a contract. In the second round, that's where it changes. Second round picks are not guaranteed of a deal, whereas first round picks are. And the Celtics, instead of trading out of that 30th overall pick, they take an experienced college player in Shireman. And that told me that number one, the Celtics, if they're going to pay for this guy, they want him to contribute to this championship level squad. They don't want to just develop them for later on down the line. Sure, that's part of the plan with Baylor Shireman because we know from Peyton Pritchard, from Sam Hauser, from Luke Cornett, from Neemias Queta, we've seen all that development within all these players. We know the same can be applied to Baylor Shireman later on in time for a bigger rotation spot, but just for where he is now, 10th, 11th man, kind of the ninth man, 9th, 10th, 11th, that's where Baylor Shireman is slotting in right now. For what he's doing, that's exactly where the Celtics want him to be, especially after drafting him last season and giving him the salary in which they did. Not a big salary at all, but they had to guarantee a salary to Shireman by picking him in the draft last season. And what he's done, look at the entirety of the season. Shireman was not a part of this rotation at any point during the first 60 games of the year, and he was stuck in Maine. And we were asking the question, where's Shireman? What's going on with Shireman? Why we drafted Shireman? I guess he's just not going to produce for the Celtics this year. I guess he's just another project player like Jordan Walsh. And yet Shireman comes into the lineup at the end of the year. We see he's a completely different weapon from what some of the other project players on the Celtics are, including a guy like Sam Hauser. And he's Sam Hauser isn't a project player anymore. He's pretty much the player he's going to be. But even a player like that, we're seeing Shireman, he owns a little bit more to his game and to his arsenal than, say, somebody like Sam Hauser. Baylor Shireman doesn't just shoot the ball. He passes it well. He rebounds well, plays well defensively, can handle the ball a little bit, is comfortable with the ball in his hands on the offensive end of the floor, and he's a little bit more crafty than we thought coming in. And he showed us all that at the end of the season. He had a phenomenal year in Maine, comes up to the Celtics, or I'm down to the Celtics, up to the Celtics. We had this conversation in the past, but comes to the Celtics, and Joe Mazzulla slots him into the rotation, and he earns himself some minutes in the playoffs later on in time with what he did at the end of the regular season. And I have to give him a B plus right here. Yes, there are going to be some points but docked off for the fact that he just wasn't in the rotation and in the lineup the first 60 games. But when his opportunity came, which at any point in time is never guaranteed for all these players, as we'll hit on with some players later on in here. But when his opportunity came, Baylor Shireman took advantage of it fully and got himself to a point where we think he's going to be a future rotation piece of this team sooner, if not later, in time when it comes to either this team next year or even in the playoffs this season. Baylor Shireman's going to be a part of the conversation for the Celtics, and the fact he was able to do that in the second half of the season, just a phenomenal job because he saved his rookie year. He really did. At one point, it was going to be a lost rookie year, but now we know Baylor Shireman. There's a lot more to his game than we initially thought. I give him a B plus here. Maybe I'm being a little generous. Maybe slacking some points. But what do you have for Baylor Shireman?
I mean, you're being much more generous on the scale than I was trying to reserve my A's and my high B's for the starters, the key contributors, the people, and I kind of reserved the I kind of made like a lower standard, but I gave Baylor Shireman a C plus as well, and you're gonna find that with a lot of the guys that I brought up next, because there were so many times that we saw performances out of each one of these guys that we could say was um, a potential positive for this team. Some of these guys just didn't receive the volume that others did, and Baylor Shireman is one of those players. During the first half of the season, we were questioning if we were even going to see any of Baylor Shireman during this regular season, and when we did see him in those sparse moments, there were some times that we were questioning why the Celtics even drafted this guy, because when the Celtics drafted Baylor Shireman at pick number 30 last year, we knew that we were expecting him to be a pro-ready player with his age. I believe he's around 24 right now, if I'm not mistaken, and is a player that has a little bit more of a NBA-ready play style, with being such a offensive threat and also being able to contribute on all three levels of scoring. But we saw him develop in Maine, and it was kind of a running joke on this show when we were gonna get by Baylor Shireman with Justin. He had a quick little grief with him because
We have to update with Justin on that one because Shireman's kind of a new piece within the rotation since he left the show. So it's like, we got to get Justin's update because we know earlier in the season he was shouting out Baylor Shireman, stay down in Maine. I don't want to see you with the Celtics. There's no reason. Now it's like, yeah, I want to see him with the C's. I love to see him with the C's. 100 shouldn't be down in Maine. There's no in the future. There's no reason for Baylor Shireman to be in Maine as much as he will. I mean, I don't. Is there?
Next
Yeah,
year,
right. Is there? You don't see Sam Hauser in Maine anymore. You're not going to see Baylor Shireman in Maine that much next season. I don't think so.
Next year, I doubt we see any of. I think next year we're gonna see a lot of the guys that were in the development stage of in the past 2 years. JD Davison being one who has been guaranteed that position on next year's roster. He's no longer going to have to worry about getting on those JetBlue plane flights that aren't with the team back and forth from Portland, Maine, or wherever the Maine Celtics are playing to wherever the Celtics are having an away game, which I could only feel terrible for the guy, but he's pursuing the NBA dream, and now he can fly comfortably with the team every single time they get on a flight. So congratulations to him for that. But you look around at the other guys, Jordan Walsh and Baylor Shireman, and you look at the CBA and if the Celtics are going to be able to keep all these guys around that they have in their starting lineup for another season to potentially, if not go back to back, become the first team in a very long time to win 3 championships with the same or nearly the same roster. Obviously, with the 2 departures that I keep on mentioning, Cornette and Hauser, and if you want to consider Craig in that conversation, you can. So those guys are going to be relied on because the Celtics physically cannot bring in other players to take in those positions, because if you are, it's going to be minimum veteran contracts, and even with the second threshold that the Celtics are over, you can't even sign some veteran minimum players because of the fact that they'll be making more than this team can afford to even produce. So seeing Baylor Shireman use that time in Maine and then be able to translate that type of game to the Boston Celtics is not just a big statement for this year, because Shireman will probably be labeled as the 10th or 11th man on the Celtics rotation going into this playoff stretch. So I But next year, when you're starting to look at contracts, one thing that's been mentioned is you look at the years and on other people's contracts, you'd have to probably, to keep one of these big men around, you'd probably have to move away from Sam Hauser this off season. And if there's going to be a guy who's going to step up into that Sam Hauser position, you'd have to look directly at Baylor Shireman. So I'm only going with the C plus because we didn't get to see too much of the Baylor Shireman game in volume, and the fact that it took a little progress for him throughout the season to get his feet comfortable to the TD Garden floor and the NBA game is just a positive sign, and you can't knock a player for growing. And yeah, I think there's definitely a bright future for Shireman within the Celtics team within the next year or so.
You mentioned bright futures on this Boston Celtics club. I believe this next player, I don't know how much of a bright future he has. I don't know how bright his future is with the Boston Celtics, but that is Torrey Craig. Now, Torrey Craig joined the Celtics team halfway through the year. And the reason I say his bright future might not be with the Celtics is because number one, he's a minimum player. Number two, he joined halfway through the season. And number three, well, he's in his mid 30s. I don't think Torrey Craig is ascending anywhere further than where he's already peaked in the NBA, whether it's today or days of the past. But Torrey Craig, this one might be a little harsh, Franco. I know you've been harsher than me here on the grading scale because this is where the grading is a little interesting. You kind of reserve some of the lower letters. Like to me, I'm basing more on standards of like say Shireman. I feel like you had a grade below mine because you're giving the letters a little lower.
I'm basing it on bottom. Like they're all getting graded on the same scale for me. They're
right. I'm kind of measuring it on like, well, Shireman, he's obviously not going to be playing as many minutes a night as Tatum. So I'm like, I can't grade him and Tatum or him and the starters on the same scale. But that's where kind of the grading scale is interesting here. I might be a little harsh on Torrey Craig, though. I gave him a D. I gave Torrey Craig a D because coming into this team, we thought, oh, he's going to be this lockdown defender and add a lot of versatility to the Celtics. 40% three-point shooter, going to come in, hit some threes, maybe take away Sam Hauser's spot. It's not what happened. That's not what happened. That's not what's happened whatsoever with Torrey Craig. He came in, his defense has been a little spotty on the Celtics, and his shooting has actually gone down since his time with the Chicago Bulls, his last team. His shooting percentage has actually gone down, and he hasn't had too many opportunities. I mean, in the games where the Celtics threw out all their bench players, started all their bench players, think back to that Orlando game, Torrey Craig doesn't score a point. And it does feel like Shireman and Hauser, both of those guys, slotted themselves ahead of Torrey Craig within the rotation potentially come playoff time. I think you're going to see Torrey Craig and Shireman. When it comes to the playoffs, you're going to see Torrey Craig used because he has experience and everything that comes with this game theoretically. But what we've seen out there from each player on court, Shireman definitely won his rotation spot. We were talking about, oh, is his rotation spot going to be replaced? Blah, blah, blah. He won his spot. He's going to get his 15, 20 minutes a night in the playoffs. Shireman, I think there's an argument. He stole some minutes there from Hauser, maybe a couple of other guys. Brown, Tatum comes out of the lineup. Could you see Shireman here or there? Certainly. Torrey Craig is a player that strikes me as if he comes in the playoffs, it's more of a theoretical. Here's what he's done in the past. Here's what we know he can do versus what he's actually done here in Boston. Because the second half of the season, he just has not looked comfortable in the lineup whatsoever. I don't think his defense is up to par. Offensively, he just doesn't get that many opportunities. Isn't that involved in the offense, and he just kind of feels like a player that's standing around most of the time when he's on the floor for the season. That's why I got to give him a D here. I thought he was going to be a little bit more for the Celtics than what he's been. I didn't expect him to be starter level. I didn't expect him to be, Tatum and Brown. Oh my goodness, that kind of level. Nobody expects guys to be Tatum and Brown's level, but I didn't expect him to be starter level or anything like that. But I think he's been below what I expect him to be here, which is he really going to challenge Hauser for that rotation spot. Same thing with Shireman. Shireman wasn't in the conversation when Craig came in, but he propelled himself into the conversation. And I thought Craig would win out of the three. I thought, okay, Shireman, Hauser. We had Jordan Walsh in the conversation as well. We'll get to him in a little bit, but you had Hauser, Shireman, Walsh, Craig. I thought Craig was going to be one of the best out of that bunch and solidify his spot in the rotation. But now, come playoff time, wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't see many minutes in the playoffs whatsoever, just because he hasn't really been a positive for the Celtics team at the moments in which he's been on the floor. And the moments have been few and far between when it comes to actually being in the rotation ahead of guys like Shireman and Hauser. Hauser and Shireman, they're getting a little bit more run. They're producing a little bit more than Craig. I think come playoff time, we're going to see that come to fruition when it comes to the rotation and minutes. Like I said, you could see him out there because of the experience, but has he earned that this year with the Celtics? Has he earned those minutes? I don't really know. I think it's been more earned in the past. So that's why I have to give him a D here. So what do you have for Torrey Craig, Franco?
I went with the C for Torrey Craig. I think that once again, it's hard for me to have one of these guys on this team lower than in that DF category, just because
We
of
are
the.
in for some interesting ones here. We have not.
But
I'm just telling you right now. We have not. I mean, this might be one of the interesting ones, but we have not entered the more interesting portion of the list.
yeah,
It's gonna come right now.
once
It's like
once we
going
reach
downhill. Here we go.
yep, we're reaching the bottom of the barrel right here. But Torrey Craig is the definition of a rental player. He was brought in as a waiver wire addition. It was a nice surprise for us when we were watching that Dallas Mavericks game. We were watching the game and we were like, oh, shoot, now we got Torrey Craig on this team for the playoffs. So we were wondering if the Celtics were going to fill those positions. Obviously, once we saw the Celtics drop down to 13 players instead of 14, we were like, all right, now they kind of have to add someone. And Torrey Craig was that player, still hasn't found himself to get fully acclimated within this lineup. I would compare him this season to what we got out of Xavier Tillman last season. I think there's still plenty of. I think there's opportunities for him to shine during the playoffs within those 5 to 8 minute rotations. I think he's going to receive just around the same amount of minutes that Baylor Shireman is going to during this playoff run, just because of the pure fact that they're there and you want to get as many legs out there to keep this team fresh as possible, especially if this team finds themselves up 2-0 / 3-0 in one of these earlier playoff series. You'll kind of see the Celtics start to rest players during a playoff game, which is kind of crazy to think about, but not out of question for the Celtics team as we talk about how good and how ready and prepared this team is for a playoff run, just how in depth they're built. So I still think that Torrey Craig hasn't fully disappointed me as a addition to this team. It's kind of hard for a player to create a contribution on a team that already has so many contributors. So in his minutes, I haven't seen him really. Obviously, on the stat sheet, he hasn't jumped out at us. But when he's on the court, there's definitely you can see why the Celtics brought him in. In the transition game, we've seen in the past few games as the Celtics are running up the score, he's been setting up these guys on fast breaks, getting loose balls on the defensive end, and creating offense for the Celtics. And he's really doing a lot of the behind the screen type of things for the Celtics during these final opportunities for these lower echelon players in the rotation to get their minutes. So that's definitely something that will come into play during playoffs. I still think that he is a valuable player on this team. It's just hard to distinguish a value on a team with so many valuable players. And I'm I wouldn't be shocked if he etches himself in to finding himself 5 to 6 points in one of these games and makes a key shot to get the team back in momentum or to maintain momentum in a playoff series.
And I'll add this in with Craig too. It's very hard to contribute to a team. Not only what you said with a, it's hard to contribute to a team with a lot of contributors, but it's also hard to contribute to a team when you're joining that team halfway through the season.
Right.
And that's what we saw. It wasn't even halfway; it was over halfway. If we're talking about the trade deadline, that's what about 50 games into the season for any team, and that's what Torrey Craig did with the Celtics. I still am going to give him a D here because he went under what I thought he was going to do. But your points are taken when it comes to Torrey Craig, kind of a non-stat sheets kind of guy, about a beyond the stat sheets type of guy. That's
You're
what I
all
was trying
right
to
in
get at
my
there.
you're all right in my book, Corey.
Hey, I was the original Torrey Craig believer back on the Denver Nuggets. I won't deny it. I love Torrey Craig
If if there
during his
was an
3 seasons
amount,
in Denver.
I bet you if we went through every single Celtics trade deadline or waiver wire conversation from 2020 to this year's waiver wire in 2025, you can guarantee on every single Celtics blog or Celtics article or Celtics fan page or Celtics post that Torrey Craig was definitely on that list and was been on the wish list of Celtics fans for a very long time.
He's like Jeremy Grant. He's like Jeremy Grant light. Everybody wants Jeremy Grant, Jeremy Grant, Jeremy Grant. Too expensive for the season now. Maybe not anymore.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows what could happen with the team over the summer? But I'll tell you a player who's not expensive for the Celtics team, and that is Jordan Walsh. He's our next player on this list. Now, Jordan Walsh, maybe I'm being a little harsh here again, but I give Jordan Walsh a D plus, a D plus. And the reason why is because Jordan Walsh, we thought this season coming in, looked comfortable with the ball in his hands, was defending well in the preseason, looked like in preseason he was going to be an actual rotation piece with the Celtics. It was like, whoa. We thought he was not going to play the Pritchard role where, he scored 14 a game and winning sixth man of the year. Not that, but we thought there could be a Pritchard role within his game from the standpoint of he steps in and becomes an actual rotation piece, like a night to night. Walsh is in the lineup. He's a consistent piece like a Pritchard. That's what I'm talking about here. But he just didn't achieve that. He came in, looked like a deer in the headlights most of the time when he was out there, and didn't get a ton of opportunity this season. Had a couple of good moments. That's why I give him the plus on the end. Had a couple of nice moments, especially that last game, career high in rebounds against the Hornets, the last game of the season. And he did come in a couple games throughout the year and play a pretty ferocious defense. I think back to that Indiana game in December where he played 17 minutes. We blew out the Pacers. Brown, it was a 44-point night for JB. But remember Walsh, he played particularly well in that game. Just not too many of those performances in the season when we thought he could be an actual consistent rotation guy. Now, I got to remind ourselves, still young, Jordan Walsh, only spent 1 year at Arkansas, 1 year on the Celtics last year. If we were doing it in college years for Jordan Walsh, right, he'd be in only his third year in college right now. So there's still a lot of development to come within Jordan Walsh's game, and he certainly is in the category of player that you mentioned Cato was in as well. He's a raw talent. He's a raw talent. A lot of his tools are still to be refined and defined within the NBA game. So I'm giving Jordan Walsh a D plus here. Didn't really live up to expectations for me, but when you really look at it, there's still more time for Jordan Walsh to turn the corner and make an impact on this team and develop. Still very young. Thought he'd be a little bit longer along in his development this year. Turns out he wasn't, so that's why I'm giving him a D plus. But what do you have for Jordan Walsh? Your grade, Franco.
You know who would be really helpful for this report card
Is Griffin.
ideal, especially at this point of this at 2 hours and 25 minutes into this show? It would be our Celtics Nation Rise guys who had the privilege of being able to sit in the arena to watch these guys in the G League, Baylor Shireman, Jordan Walsh, and we really didn't see much out of these guys. Going into the season, I had a feeling that Jordan Walsh was going to be able to pick up a few more minutes. Maybe I saw a potential that him and Hauser were the ones splitting those minutes back and forth as they kind of were yin and yang coming off the bench as I viewed them. I saw Hauser as more of an offensive threat, less athletic, but able to score at an efficient clip. And then you would look at Jordan Walsh, who is a very athletic player who can slash to the rim, also active on the defensive end, but he can't score at that same shooting clip. And obviously, this season he wasn't able to make have enough games to make that statement known and kind of separate himself from the rest of this team. But the the Celtics are really a team that you see this more than a lot of other teams, that these guys that are very minimal names and some casual Boston Celtics fans aren't expected to know their names, but in a year or two, you're going to see Jordan Walsh getting these reps and opportunities just due to the fact that of the roster realignments. But he's still a player I have a lot of confidence in, and this season I threw him at a C because we didn't see nearly as many highlights and positives out of his game that we saw out of Baylor Sharman during that second half. But there were still a couple of good showings, and there's still that potential of him becoming a good player. But you look at JD Davison, Kada, and Walsh. They're three guys that are still considerably young into their careers, and I think are a refinement or two away, and a good off season or a good summer league or a good preseason away from really cementing themselves as those next guys up, like Pritchard, Hauser, and Cornette were able to this year.
I think you mentioned something important in there. Jordan Walsh at the end of this season, it was a dead sprint between him and Shireman for not necessarily the last rotation spot, but I already mentioned it. It was Hauser. He wasn't performing well this season, and we were questioning, well, is Hauser's spot, is it going to be taken?
Oh, I think you just muted yourself. Or did I mute you? Oh.
What is happening?
No, you're good. You're good.
What? I don't know what just happened. I'm not touching any of the screens right now.
I didn't touch nothing.
Me neither. I have an iPad down here, but I don't. My fingers, nothing's going on. So I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Something must have gotten it. But anyway, I look at the Shireman, Hauser, Craig, Walsh. That was the conversation. I mean, it was that week we faced the Sixers and Blazers back to back. We had the Lakers and Jazz and Thunder and Nuggets, all those teams in one week. That 7-game homestand, really. That was the point in time we were looking at Hauser's spot in the rotation as up in the air. He wasn't playing well in the season. We're going, can Craig replace him? Can Shireman replace him? Can Walsh replace Sam Hauser? And in that time, it was a dead sprint between Craig, Shireman, and Walsh to potentially replace a guy like Sam Hauser in the lineup. And Sam Hauser showed up. He showed out. He came up with a player spotlight out in Utah, 33 points, started shooting the ball better. We already said that he earned his position in the rotation. But it was Shireman who came through out of all those three. It was Shireman who really shone through and showed us all that, ooh, this could be a piece for the Celtics in the future, if not the present day in this year's playoffs, Shireman could be. Craig, we already talked about him, didn't do so much of that, but Walsh, even less so. I mean, I feel like I'm generous giving him a D plus here because, he's above Torrey Craig. And that's because of some of the earlier season contributions from Walsh and just the fact he's a younger player, a way younger player than Torrey Craig by 10 years plus. But Jordan Walsh, that dead sprint at the end of the year, I mean, he lost. I mean, he was not even in the rotation consistently during moments where we thought, oh, he's going to get a real run here and get himself a real opportunity. He wasn't in the rotation at those moments as much as we thought he was going to be. So I have to give Jordan Walsh a D here, but I do want to ask you a question about Jordan Walsh. If Jordan Walsh, right? So next season, let me just get this straight real quick. So Jordan Walsh's contract, I believe it goes into next season, but as far as beyond next season, right? Because Walsh this year, I would say he kind of underachieved on expectations. We thought, okay, he's going to be, a little bit better of a player. Okay, so next year, $2.2 million, right? It's unguaranteed salary. I'll say that right now. It's an unguaranteed salary next season, but even more so unguaranteed, $2.4 million in 26-27. Now, I tend to think that the Celtics are going to keep that on their roster and try to continuously develop Jordan Walsh just at the cheap price in which he's going to be at for that 26-27 season. But if he does not perform next year, right? We thought this year he could maybe become a small rotation player for the season. Didn't happen. If this happens again next season, and the question originally was going to be, will the Celtics pick up his team option? Considering the money and the way it moves around the NBA, the money, I mean, the salary cap, it heightens every year, and so do the salaries of all the players on the Celtics roster and on most rosters. But considering that, they're probably going to keep him on that team option 2 years from now. But do you see his career in jeopardy next season if he does not perform up to par with what his expectations are? This season, there's some leeway knowing, okay, still young. This will be year 3 of college, only second year. Played a lot in the G League last year, played a lot in the G League this year. But if he doesn't perform next season, is Jordan Walsh's career in jeopardy?
Career? Probably.
At least for another contract. Like you look at another, he has this contract with the Celtics as his rookie deal simply. But say he doesn't perform next year, is he going to be given another opportunity by another NBA team?
It's hard not to say that a player is not going to get a second opportunity just because of the fact that it is the NBA, and there have been numerous occasions where even if you look across sports that the rookie guy just didn't have the fit and he was never going to find success that he was going to find elsewhere on the team.
We were talking about that last night.
Yeah, right. This is a recall.
Nesmith and Langford.
Yeah, this is just a recall to last night, but you look at the Jordan Walsh, and he could potentially. I like to look at this team in a positive light going into next year, but I'm looking at these guys, and I think that they are going to be able to live up to these expectations just because of the fact that we've seen this blueprint laid out by the Celtics year in and year out, time and time again, ever since even when Danny Ainge was in office and when it transitioned over to Brad Stevens taking over the general manager role you still saw this team continue to have their levels of progression. And there's been a few players that have fallen out of that. And I could see in that standpoint, if Jordan Walsh doesn't find that success, that he could be potentially a piece moved on from. But I really see the Celtics sticking to this young group of guys that they have at the back end of their bench, just because they've already been around for 2 to 3 years, each of them. And I think they just stick with them and continue to ride out this development. And those 4 guys that you can consider your young core, or not young core, but your under 25, near 25, that haven't hit their peaks yet, I think all those guys are pretty safe bets that they will be able to find success within the NBA.
Yes, and Jordan Walsh. Hey, we'll see what happens. No, we won't see what will happen. We will know what happens in the future when that day comes, of course. But this next player on the list, this one might be the most controversial one. We mentioned it about 2.5 hours ago. All right, we mentioned it. Xavier Tillman.
We teased it for you guys. If you stuck around since we said that 2.5 hours ago, we're finally rewarding you.
Here we go. Xavier Tillman. All right. Xavier Tillman. Okay.
That's pretty much it. Can we just
it's one of those, like, you look at the kid's paper and go, oh my goodness, there's no right answers here.
And Xavier Tillman. Hey, his name was on the paper. He wrote his name down.
Or do those count as points here? Do the 7 minutes per game this season count as points? I gave Xavier Tillman a flat out F.
Oh.
F for Xavier Tillman. F. It has. I'm sorry. This is like Peyton Pritchard. There's no other right answer. There's no other right. This man could not even get in during garbage time this season. I mean, the last game of the year when all of the reserves are playing, Xavier Tillman did not see the floor. Come on. Didn't see the floor the last game of the season. And this is in a season where Xavier Tillman was expected to be the 3rd big man on the roster. And when he came into the Celtics organization back in February of 2024, we thought, Xavier Tillman, he might be your Al Horford replacement one day. You never know. He might be your Al Horford replacement. He has been so far from that expectation this season. I mean, he is in the range now of this will be his last NBA contract, because I don't see another team signing him after this experience. This year has been utterly horrendous when it comes to Xavier Tillman. It's not because of his play on floor. It's because of the fact he hasn't gotten any minutes on the floor. Absolutely none. Literally, he can't even get in during garbage time. And looking at the entire big man rotation, he was supposed to be the 3rd big man. He's easily the 5th. And when you're talking about a 5th big man, it's like he's not even in the rotation. He's not even playing. And this is a slightly veteran player. I mean, he's played on 2 NBA franchises, the Grizzlies and the Celtics. Still 25, 26 years old. He's not, like, right now, like, it's not really in that developing range anymore. Like, he might have some development to his game, but he's getting a little older, a little long in his NBA career. Contributed to the Celtics in the playoffs last year. Came into the season with high expectations of being that 3rd big man, the next Al Horford. Didn't happen whatsoever. It was the complete opposite. Didn't even find minutes with his club. Wasn't that he was injured. Wasn't that he was hurt. It's just the fact Xavier Tillman couldn't hit 3-point shots, couldn't perform out on the floor. It quite frankly looks like he has bricks on his feet every time he plays on the floor. He doesn't look in shape, unfortunately. I hate to say it. That's just something with players sometimes where it's like, okay, this guy just straight up looks like he's struggling running up and down a basketball floor and side to side in the half court. That's what Xavier Tillman looked like for most of the season. Was not a key contributor to the Celtics by any means. Couldn't even get in during garbage time. Couldn't even get in during game 82. The most valuable thing Xavier Tillman did this season was go down to Maine, or up to Maine, or down to the G League, up to the Maine Celtics, to Portland, to practice with Kristaps Porzingis during his rehab. That is seriously the most valuable thing in which Xavier Tillman did on this Celtics team this season. And that's why easily. This is the first F of the entire report card here for the Celtics, and I might have another F on here. We will get to that player a little later, but Xavier Tillman, he's my first F. He's the most definitive F. I'm very interested to hear what you have to, what your grade is for Xavier Tillman, because I know you're a little higher on Xavier Tillman, but the fact of the matter is, awful season with the Celtics, did not get in the games, and I mean, I understand at the end of the year, it's like, can he slot in? It's like, no, never did, never will. And I think moving ahead with the C's, he's on contract for next season, could be around again, but I don't know if he's going to get another NBA contract after the one he's on with the Celtics right now.
I'm gonna stick. I'm sticking around in your corner, X. Don't worry, I got you. I'm gonna give you a. I'm gonna give him a D for this season.
Wow.
That's the lowest grade.
What did he do? What was it? All the clapping on the bench? I don't understand.
I just think that it was just it's a poor situation for him, and it was misutilization from him. I think that him being he's kind of a outcast in the Celtics game plan when it comes down to it, and I think there's still, like I said, last year, 365 days ago, I don't think he's that different of a player that was giving us contributions in the Dallas Mavericks playoff series, NBA Finals. It's mind-boggling to me that people think that a player can just lose all of their talent within a 365-day stretch.
Well,
and
I'll pose it to you like this though. Did he ever have talent? Because last year during the playoffs, first of all, he shot 100% from three. 100% from three, made every single 3-pointer. And we kind of turned him as, this 3-point shooting big man who can stand in the corner. Like I have in my preseason notes, he's somebody that could kill teams from the corner because he knows kind of when to leak out to the corner, kind of knows how to occupy the space on the floor. Heady player in that regard. But when he actually gets out to the 3-point line, can he actually shoot the ball? Looking at his entire Michigan State career, looking at his entire Memphis Grizzlies career, now looking at his Celtics career, there are no outside of the 2024 playoff run where he made 100% of his threes, there are no data points out there that show Xavier Tillman is a legitimate 3-point shooting big man. And that's what he's utilized for every time he comes into the game.
Yeah,
there's definitely some conversation when it comes to the utilization of Tillman, but if he can't do exactly what his team is asking him to do and what this era is asking him to do, it's like he doesn't have a spot out there. He doesn't have a spot. Could he be utilized a little better in places? Probably, but maybe not on the Celtics. Not on the Celtics, apparently. Not on the C's.
Just the undersized pit bull. That's a role that's kind of died off in the NBA. Is the undersized pit bull, the PJ Tuckers, the Trevor Ariza. Well, not Trevor Ariza, but like
Trevor Ariza. I was talking about Trevor Ariza the other day. It's like people don't know about Trevor Ariza anymore. It's crazy.
The Montrezl Harrells, the Nenes. That's where I see Xavier Tillman's game, and I've kind of understood that, and I just think he's like a bowling ball that you could put on the court with Cornette or Keita, and he's still on contract for next year. Obviously, he's kind of lost his trade value, so who knows? Maybe the Celtics can salvage something, especially if they do in a situation. Like I'm gonna keep on bringing up the worst case scenario because you gotta prepare for the worst and hope for the best, especially when it comes to off seasons. If there's an off season that both Luke Cornett and Al Horford move on from being Boston Celtics, you kind of have to look at Tillman and be like, okay, what can we actually do with you? But who knows? In playoff garbage time, I think he can still fill in, but a D is as low as I can go because if he was an F, he probably would have been off this team and this team would have rather eaten that dead money and been like, okay, fine, we'll find someone else on the market before the playoffs roll around, because we saw teams have absolutely no problem putting players on the waiver wire, and Xavier Tillman, to my surprise, wasn't one of them. But I just think that that must mean that this team sees something in them, or they are just going to see how they can utilize them. But even still, I feel like, and the even just going into next year, I still think there's a fighting chance for him, but it really is going to come down to what this preseason looks like for him, which is something you usually say about football, but in basketball, it's starting to become a real conversation, especially when teams are cutting down from 18 to 15 players on their team.
Yeah, and well, I will say we'll be 18 though now. Three two-way spots on a roster. But this other player that we're going to talk about here coming up next was on a two-way spot all the way up until the last game of the season, and that is JD Davison. Now, JD Davison, from my perspective, you could go different ways with this because one, didn't really play with the Celtics at all this season. Didn't really get a good run in. When he did, not the greatest of results. That Orlando game, he shot 0 of 6 in the game against the Charlotte Hornets the other day. He had a nice dunk there, but it wasn't like he was a consistent contributor on the floor. But that being said, where JD Davison did play this season, down in the G League, up in Portland, Maine, with the Maine Celtics, he won G League MVP. It's like, again, okay, we have multiple MVPs here. Jason Tatum nearly won MVP for the entire league. He's going to be either the third or fourth slot in MVP voting for this season. It's like he has to receive an A plus. Pritchard received the MVP out of all the bench players this season, the most valuable bench player in the Sixth Man of the Year award. I mean, he's going to receive that award eventually. Heavy favorite right now for Pritchard. Of all the bench players in the NBA, Pritchard, the most valuable. And then out of all the G League players out there, every single G League player, the MVP was JD Davison. So in the spot in which he played, so Tatum, the spot in which he played, all-time starter for the Celtics, nearly won MVP. A plus for me. Pritchard in his spot, sixth man off the bench, is going to win sixth man of the year, MVP of the bench players. A plus for me. And JD Davison playing down in the G League for most of the year. Didn't really get a run with the Celtics. Can definitely dock off some points for that. But where he was playing in Portland, he won the MVP. And for that, I have to give him an A plus because he did everything and more that he had to do in the G League to earn himself that standard roster spot at the end of the season. Winning MVP in the G League, I mean, that's nothing to spit at. That league is talented. Don't get me wrong. I mean, G League players, they get their slack, but at the same time, those some talented players down in the G League. It's getting ever more talented, and the talent pool is expanding for the G League. JD Davison, in the environment in which he played in most of the season, won the MVP award, and for that, I have to give JD Davison an A plus. You could dock him because he wasn't with the team for most of the year. Some mixed results when he was with the team. Didn't really get his opportunity, but did enough in the G League, won the MVP, and earned himself a standard roster spot. And for that, I mean, just look at the entire season. MVP, earned himself a roster spot. I mean, those are two things right there. If you were to look at the to-do list for JD Davison at the beginning of the year, it was first one was standard roster spot, and second one, yeah, if you can win that G League MVP and dominate in the G League, go ahead and do it. And that's exactly what JD Davison did, and that's why I have to give him an A plus here. But what do you have for JD Davison, Franco?
Man, I didn't know we were basing it. Like, that's where the scale's so off. Sure, I'll ship the flowers. JD Davison, just comment in the comment section below what your address is, and we'll send you a batch of flowers. But I went with the C, and this is just because I didn't really account for the G League MVP in my.
But see, here's my thing. How did he, if you don't account for the G League, it's like, how do you even give him a grade or a good grade? Because like a C is like in the middle of the road. But I'm saying like on the Celtics roster, it's like he literally didn't do any, if you're talking about on the Celtics, it's like might as well be an F. It's his third year in the organization. He's still not contributing to the actual Celtics roster. I mean, it would be like if Jordan Walsh next year again didn't contribute, and that's where J.D. Davison's at in his career, and that's where I'm like, if you were just talking Celtics roster, the progression is an F. But if you're talking, okay, what he was able to do to earn himself a standard spot and where he was actually playing, I'm giving an A+ because he took the opportunity in which was given to him and he made the most of it, and that's what I look at with J.D. Davison. Because not every opportunity is going to be the same. It's not going to be, Pritchard's opportunity isn't the same as Tatum's, and Tatum's isn't the same as Pritchard's, nor is the same as J.D. Davison's.
Yeah, so I didn't want to negate any points from him for, like I said in earlier characters or players that we've talked about, is I don't want to negate from just based on the volume that I saw from these guys. And that's where it kind of became a little challenging for these back end grades. Obviously, J.D. Davison getting the G League MVP and also receiving that standardized contract. I've been probably the biggest J.D. Davison advocate since he came out of college on this program. For him to finally get that standardized deal is an amazing feat for him, and I think in future years, I think you can see him being able to play next to Peyton Pritchard in that B B group, kind of be that third string point guard behind Pritchard. So you can, as Pritchard's role grows, that's going to open up some bottom end minutes for players like J.D. Davison, and the athleticism and what he brings to the game is very different than what you're going to receive from the other guards. And it's mainly just how fast he is on the court, and it's some physical attributes you just can't compare to. And J.D. Davison is one of those players that's one of those freaks that can light you up driving to the rim, can create highlight level plays, and can spark a transition with a two-step head start on a player. He is just that incredibly quick and athletic, and seeing the rest of his game mold around him in the G League is only prepared him more and more and more for this opportunity to join the Celtics. And not saying that he's competing for minutes this playoff, but I think he'll definitely come off the bench in the garbage minutes of this year's playoff so he can have that experience, which is, if I'm not mistaken, was he on the roster for last year's playoff? Technically on the 15. Actually, yeah, I know him and Drew Peterson were both on the roster because they. Actually, no. Did either Drew Peterson or J.D. Davison receive minutes last year?
They were two-way guys, if I'm not mistaken. Now, two-way guys, I don't believe they're eligible for the playoffs.
Because
And
I
I
do
know that rule
remember
changed for a certain NBA season. Maybe it was 21. But yeah, they were both two-way guys last year. But I will say, we have talked about all the standard roster guys now, concluding J.D. Davison. And we do get to the two-way slots. J.D. Davison was a part of that two-way conversation before. However, Celtics still two-way players on the roster. And in terms of playoff eligibility, I do want to go find this real quick, but I'll find it while we're answering these next couple of players. Drew Peterson is up next, though. Drew Peterson, another two-way guy for the Celtics. Maybe he was battling for a standard spot with J.D. Davison, didn't get it. But it's very understandable what J.D. Davison was able to do versus what Drew Peterson. I'm giving Drew Peterson a B here. Now, I think you can go lower than this, but I will say he had a couple more moments than I thought this season. I will say he didn't have the best season in the world, wasn't involved totally, but December did have a couple moments there against the Heat, against the Cavs, a couple of moments later on this season. Kind of picked his game apart later on, kind of we're more on the conclusion of J.D. Davison, just not a real player for the C's. But in terms of all of his minutes, it's like I didn't expect him to have that much of an opportunity. Did have a couple of good moments. I'm giving him a B here.
you're gonna notice that with all these guys, it might be just a was me just giving away the easiest grade, but I went with a C plus for Drew Peterson because of what we saw from him in his NBA minutes for the Celtics. He's one of those players that I put positive above JD Davison because of what he was able to do on the court wearing a Boston Celtics jersey. Obviously, what JD Davison was able to do in Maine is great, but Drew Peterson gave us a few contributing games this season that were eye opening, and we're like, wow, this kid might potentially have a chance to make a run at a standardized uh, contract on the Boston Celtics.
Yeah,
Not
before
this year, but
Shireman,
next
before
year. Right.
Davison, the talk was about Drew Peterson, 100%.
Yeah, and I think that he lived up to those standards just as well as we thought he could. Obviously, you're not going to see someone continue on that heater fresh out of the G League. So I think he's another player that the future is extremely bright for the Boston Celtics. Hopefully, the Celtics can find a way to keep him around for next year. I don't know what the I'm not too good with the legalities of what a two-way contract entitles a team to. I believe that makes him a restricted free agent for the Celtics next off season. Drew Peterson,
Potentially. Let's see. So, um, well, yeah, let's go look this up. So, Drew Peterson, the restrict, I feel like the two-way guys, let's
I think
find out.
I
Let's
think he's a
find out.
restricted.
I Okay, so he's on a 1-year deal, which you see some of the salaries at the bottom here. Yeah, he'll be a restricted free agent this season or this summer, I should say.
Yep.
Yep. Restricted free agent. Yep, you're right.
Yeah. So
Oh, and
I
I have an
mean,
answer too. Two-way guys, the eligibility for the playoffs, they cannot play in the NBA playoffs. So two-way guys. So we're talking about Drew Peterson, and we'll talk about Miles Norris here. Neither one of those guys are eligible for the NBA playoffs. So that's where JD Davison's conversion into a standard contract was so big. If there are some garbage time playoff minutes, or there are some minutes possible for JD Davison in the playoffs somewhere, he'll be eligible. But Miles Norris and Drew Peterson, they will not be. But go ahead on Drew Peterson, Franco.
yeah, and I, that's where I was a little confused because Drew Peterson's going to be I assume Drew Peterson, Miles Norris will be assuming the position that J.D. Davison and Drew Peterson did last year, which was behind the bench with the assistant coaches. So that's where you'll see Drew
That's
Peterson
where Joe
and
Mazzulla
Miles.
used to be, second row Joe.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you'll see Miles Norris and Drew Peterson back there just hanging out, and what we saw from them, I think the 3-point shooting is definitely a threat for the Celtics. And then once again, it's this back end of the roster is so hard to talk about. And if you tune into our guys over at Celtics Nation Rise, they will be able to give you so much more in depth information about these players because there's even players I have questions about, like Miles Norris and like these guys that we only saw such a small sample size from as people who cover the Boston Celtics NBA regular organization more than we've watched any of the G League. I guarantee that there's a lot more that they could pull out of his game than I could. But from what I saw, I was genuinely impressed. And if he's around next year, who knows? I keep on bringing this up, but next year, Drew Peterson is a solid candidate to be the 15th man on the Celtics roster when it comes to trying to maintain a salary, being loyal to the salary tax that the Celtics have accumulated over the years. So if they want to get back under that, they're going to have to rely on these guys that are in their lower farm systems and rely on their development to fill in as the Celtics try to ease out and even out their cap space.
Well, it's funny now. The NBA kind of has a farm system. Kind of expect
Yeah,
these guys to couple years in the G League. Can you make your way up to a place where you're on the roster, and then once you're on the roster, can you make your way into the rotation? Can you go even further than that? We've seen that with the Celtics, and we're seeing that with a couple NBA teams as well. I mean, look at Hardenstein this past summer. Got paid by not the Houston Rockets. He played with the Houston Rockets at one point. Paid by the Oklahoma City Thunder, but he's the Houston Rockets G League team a long time ago. He was a champion. When he might have been champion or MVP with the Rio Grande Valley Vipers. So I don't remember. But you do see a lot of that farm system come to play in the NBA more often than not now. But this next player, I mean, we used to talk about the Celtics Nation Rise crew. They have an interview with our next guy here on the list, and 100% they could tell you more about Mr. Miles Norris than us because they're in the building. The Celtics Nation Rise guys, they're in the building for these main Celtic games. They get interviews with these guys, and Griffin would have been the perfect guest to bring on for the back half of this show because he would have been able to say a million words on guys like J.D. Davison, Miles Norris, Drew Peterson, even Baylor Shireman, who played most of the year in the G League. But Miles Norris next. I want to breeze through this one. I'm giving him a B because what? A seems a little bit much. Anything lower than that, it's like he was here for a week. He was here for a week, basically as a two-way guy. Got into a couple of games. Looks pretty lengthy out there. I'm kind of looking at him going, can he, like what level of a defender can he get to? He really has some length to himself. Had a couple of nice blocks out there in some of the last games of the season, but I'm just going to give Miles Norris a B. Cannot really say much about him because we haven't seen much from him this season whatsoever, and just joined the Celtics organization. And there's not, to me, it's a flat B because you can't, like, it's not like he went crazy and earned
yeah.
himself an A, but it's not
He's
like
sort
he
of
did anything to earn himself a lower grade than, you came in, you played your role, you played solid for 3 games. I mean, what
he
more can you say?
scored.
Again, Griffin would be able to write you a book about Miles Norris, and actually, man, he did an interview, so everybody go check that out. But Miles Norris here, kind of hard of a grade to give, but I'm giving a B.
Yeah, C, sure.
Yeah, it's like C
He
B.
looks.
It's like
He
C
looks.
plus B minus, like anywhere in that range, like just middle of the road. Like just
Yeah,
he didn't do it. That's the thing. He didn't really do anything. It's like he didn't
he
do
was
anything bad.
definitely
He didn't do
there.
anything special. It's like
Yeah,
just give
he
him the
was
middle of the
definitely
road.
there. He was
Give him the
definitely
middle of the
there.
road.
Seems like a nice guy. I think that him coming into this team was kind of a head scratcher to me because I never really found out much about him before he signed with the Celtics. I'm pretty sure he came from another team's G League team, but the Celtics had to let go of
Yes.
their second round draft pick, Anton Watson. And this is once again where I would. This is where I want to talk to Griffin, and we're gonna. I'll guarantee you that we'll get these
Whoa,
answers out of him.
he played for Santa Barbara. He played for the Gauchos, the University of California, Santa Barbara. Okay, he played
Sure.
he comes from San Francisco. He played for the College Park Skyhawks, the Atlanta Hawks G League team. Played overseas actually last year at a certain point for a team in the man, I don't even know the
Sure.
Turkish First League. Okay, the Turk. I was like, I don't even know. I can't tell what language that is. Turkish First League. He played in last year. Played with the Memphis Hustle. That's what I saw. He had a contract with the Grizzlies. I believe a training camp deal, and then signs on with the Boston Celtics. And I believe, looking at it here, he actually made his NBA debut with the Celtics.
Yeah.
So he was, he's on the College Park Skyhawks and the Memphis Hustle, but he never made an appearance for the Hawks. Never made an appearance for the Grizzlies. Made an appearance for the Celtics at the end of the year. Made his NBA debut. Hey, get some points from me for that. Franco, give him a C. I'll give him a B. NBA
Yeah.
debut. A little,
I think
little one on the top. You go to the dispenser, they give you a little birthday joint. That's what you're gonna give out to Miles Norris here for his NBA debut.
Yeah. What I think Miles Norris is here to do is to kind of put that pressure and kind of breathe down the back of Jordan Walsh's neck potentially because we saw that he didn't completely live up to the standards of what was expected of him. But I also want to know what happened with Anton Watson. I wasn't watching his stats down in the G League, but I would think it's extremely weird that the team let go of a player that they drafted to bring in Miles Norris. So that means there must have either been something they really liked out of Miles Norris that they saw and were like, we cannot miss out on having this on our team, to release a player that was their second round draft pick, or that Anton Watson wasn't working out so badly in the main G League that the Celtics decided to cut ties with him.
Well, I'm gonna, let's move on to Anton Watson because I'm gonna say this: we've now graded every single standard player and two-way player, but we go the distance as you clear. Oh wait, people can't see this on the top, but we can. Well, we see 3 hours up here, but it's probably, I don't know, folks. Your YouTube, everybody's down here, but we obviously go the extra distance here on Celtics Talk Weekly, and we're going to the traded/waived players section of the roster. So players who are on the roster this season at one point or another, but we're either traded or waived. Now we only have 2 of them, so other teams they might have 10 of them, or depending on the team you're talking about. But for the Celtics, only 2, and one of them is Anton Watson. I'm giving him a grade here. I'm giving him an F. Now, who has a second round pick? First of all, we're talking about Miles Norris making his NBA debut. Anton Watson never made his NBA debut this season because he was cut halfway through the year as a second round pick as a two-way guy for the Celtics. I've never seen that before on the Seas. I've seen it on other teams, but that just kind of goes to show. I mean, you see a guy like J.D. Davison, he's on his last two-way deal. He's winning G League MVP. The Celtics have kept him around all 3 years. Walsh around 2 years. We saw other guys with the team stay around multiple years on two-way deals. Guys like Tremont Waters,
Jordan
most
Mickey.
notably. I mean, the list goes on. Ever since the two-way position came about, and back in 2017, it wasn't that long ago. Now there's 3. See, this is the thing too. There used to be 2 two-way spots. 2. There's 3 this year. There's 3. And the Celtics, they draft Anton Watson second round out of Gonzaga, a good basketball school, a good basketball program. And he's cut halfway through the year. That is weird. That signals something was not right within that situation. I got to give him an F because, I mean, at the bare minimum, you got to stay on the roster if you're a second round pick and there's 3 two-way spots available. And you get replaced by Miles Norris, who, I mean, Miles Norris seems lengthy. Like, I don't see how that's, I don't see how that happened. And I'm trying to think of another situation here where a player was cut halfway through the season like this. I mean, I just don't. I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's other examples in the NBA with two-way guys, but like to draft, like, okay, no, this is what I was thinking about. The Celtics have cut second-round picks before the season, but that's because of roster crunching in the past, where it's like, oh, they only have 15 spots. They didn't have two-way spots. Like in 2016, the Celtics made, man, how many picks did they make? So they drafted Jaylen Brown, Gershon Yabusele, Ante Zizic. They drafted Ben Bentel, Demetrius Jackson, and Abdul Nader. So I think they had 6 picks that year. And they even traded some away, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016. All of a sudden, 9 years ago, just crazy. But that year, they drafted 6 players in the draft. The Celtics did. Nader, Bentel, Demetrius Jackson, Ante Zizic, Gabusele, and Jaylen Brown, of course. And under those circumstances, there was no two-way spots back then. So there were only 15 spots. Ben Bentel, see you later. Goodbye. Ante Zizic, you're going to be stored overseas. Like, that's the situation I could see where there's a roster crunch. There's no roster crunch here. It's just we're replacing one two-way guy with another from around the league. And that's why Anton Watson, I'm sorry. Maybe it's unfair to give him a grade, but hey, we go the extra distance here. I got to give him an F because he didn't even stay on the roster.
The mystery of Yam Madar, whatever happened to him.
What about Joan Begaron or Marcus Thornton? The other Marcus Thornton. The first Marcus Thornton was traded for Isaiah Thomas. The second one, draft and stash player overseas, came out of William and Mary. Stashed him overseas. Haven't seen Begaron, haven't seen Yamadar, haven't seen Marcus Thornton. that's why drafting stash players. Like I'm a little optimistic on the fact, past couple of years we thought the Celtics. I mean, yes, they did the whole Yamadar Begaron thing in 2020 and 2021, but from 2022 on, it's like 22 you have JD Davison second round, 23 you have Jordan Walsh second round, 24 you have Baylor Shireman at the end of the first round. That's where you're thinking Anton Watson, he's not going to be this draft and stash goodbye, not on the roster. You're thinking he's going to be more of the realm of JD Davison and Walsh, who were thinking, couldn't they maybe finagle their way into the rotation a little bit? Maybe can they do it? It's like that the last 2 years, or 22 and 23, great draft years. I mean, I ragged on Brad Stevens for taking another small guard in 2022, but hey, when that guy wins G League MVP and earns himself a standard spot, can't complain about that pick. Those second round picks, Walsh and JD Davison, great second round picks. Anton Watson, I mean, what happened there? I mean, basically, might as well draft a draft and stash player.
He's over in New York right now, and he's actually played 9 games for the New York Knicks and is just under averaging 1 point per game.
That is unbelievable.
0.9. So yeah, he's over in New York. So who knows? Maybe in the garbage time minutes of round 2.
He played 1 minute. Man, he's from Cordero Orleans. I mean, hey, it's what there's a book with that city in it. I mean, I don't know if you read that book at elementary school. Somebody might know what I'm talking about out there, but it's from that city. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty amazing. He's on the Knicks right now, getting minutes. I mean, not necessarily minutes, but he made his NBA debut.
Yeah.
F for the Celtics. I mean, I guess C for the season. The fact that he made his NBA debut, landed somewhere else. That just is so weird to me, though, that they cut him. Like, why? Now he's on the Knicks. Like, why? Why did you draft him second round to cut him 4 months later? Like, what exactly happened with Watson? I don't know.
We need to call
another clip. Like, there was another. Like, this is. See, we don't have like that. I try to put out clips for every single like event that happens throughout the season. Whether it's can we talk about an NBA topic? Obviously, with the Celtics, we're gonna try to put out every topic. Anton Watson. There's a post game where I asked Griffin specifically about what happened to Anton Watson, and I don't remember what he said. But now I'm interested because now I'm like, now I want to get that as a clip and also want to find out his answer because I felt like there was some insight in that. But I'm glad to see he latched on with the Knicks. It's a little perplexing as to what went down there, but that's a question for when we have Brad Stevens on the program and we interview him on here. What happened to Anton Watson that day? What went on? We don't know. But I will say another player who left the Celtics midway through the season, he gets a better grade for me, and this is our last player on the entire Celtics roster, the 2024-25 Boston Celtics. This is the last player you'll see on the grading sheet and on the basketball reference sheet as well. At the end of the year, not every player is on the basketball reference sheet right now, but when the season ends, they'll put everybody out there. And this player will be maybe not the last on the list on basketball reference, but last on my list here. And that is Jaden Springer, because Jaden Springer was the enigma earlier this season. Can he get more minutes? Can we slot in Jaden Springer, actually use him? He did receive a couple of minutes there in January, early February, but we all know early February shipped off to the Houston Rockets, where he was eventually waived before joining the Utah Jazz. Danny Ainge inks Jaden Springer a contract. But I'm giving Jaden Springer B+ here because he did save an entire game against the Los Angeles Clippers out west for the Celtics this season. Thought in the moments in which he played hound dog, ferocious defense, offensively, just complete mess. We all know he's 22, 23 years old, still a developing player. The Celtics, they got rid of him not for talent purposes. That's the thing. With Watson, was it talent purposes? Was it behind the scenes? Was it because they like Miles Norris? We don't really know. We know when it comes to Jaden Springer, the Celtics got rid of Jaden Springer because of his salary and because of the fact he cut off, 11 million? It was like 9, 10, $11 million off the luxury tax books, and that's only for Jaden Springer, who wasn't really making the biggest impact in the world. Kind of was it kind of got the short straw in the draw there. Wasn't his fault that he was traded away, is basically what I'm saying. Could have played better to earn his spot, sure, but when you're talking about the money and cutting off $11 million for a player who costs $2 million and somebody who's not contributing on a regular basis, I mean, the Celtics kind of had to get rid of him at the deadline, regardless of what he was bringing. I mean, he wasn't what if he was bringing rotation level talent and contribution. Sure, the Celtics could have kept him and probably would have kept him. And now that you look back at it, it's like they probably decided like Springer or Tillman. Who are they gonna trade away? They end up going Springer in this situation as the younger player and maybe the less crucial player on the roster. But I'm giving Springer a B plus for the season. Had himself some moments. Was traded away from the team, not necessarily unfairly, but under circumstances that he wasn't entirely in control of. So I'm giving Springer a B plus on the season.
I'm just gonna be petty and I'm gonna downgrade your grade on Jaden Springer down to a B because he's the reason why Lonnie Walker isn't on this roster today because we couldn't find a trade partner with him.
That's a very good point. That is a very good point. Like, should your grade be downgraded because you prevented the roster from being good elsewhere, even though it came within another player being on the roster? It's like, interesting.
Yeah, that's why I'm giving him a knock. But obviously, a young, talented player who we saw the potential in down in the G League, and if there was any person I wanted to have scoop up Jaden Springer on a free whim, it's Danny Ainge because I feel like the Celtics and Danny Ainge, Celtics.
I mentioned him like 3 hours ago. I'm like, man, was that this live stream I mentioned him? And this live stream we're recording, but 3 hours ago I mentioned Danny Ainge.
There's always going to be that cordial relationship between the Celtics and the Jazz, just as long as Danny Ainge stays within their office over there. So I'm happy that he ended up over there. Obviously, it seems like he's starting to get some minutes. Has played in 17 games over in Utah, averaging 13 minutes per game in those games and averaging 3.8 games or 3.8 points per game. So that's damn near his career high, and I think he's only going to get better from that standpoint. Obviously, the threshold that he had the Celtics in during the trade deadline led to some interesting conversations what the Celtics could get in retrieval for Jaden Springer, and they were able to get a few future draft picks and also were able to wipe that off the books. And I think that it's not a trade that the Celtics, even if Jaden Springer goes on to become a rotational level player in the NBA, the Celtics can look at and be like that he's the one that got away, because the Celtics were never really in a position to have him for the long term. Obviously, if he worked out, great, but he didn't, and wish him the best of luck over in Utah.
Of course, and anybody, we see some coaches, executives. Danny Ainge, the most notable one out there, that it's like feels like Celtics light, right? Like Will Hardy, Danny Ainge, they have everything going out on Utah for them. Head coach Will Hardy, GM Danny Ainge.
I hope they get
owner
Cooper.
Ryan Smith. It feels like Celtics light out there. Feel a little like Celtics light because they have a good owner too. Ryan Smith's a good owner. It's like, yeah,
give
Celtics
Danny
always
Ainge
pride
Cooper
themselves
flag.
on good ownership.
Give Danny Ainge Cooper flag, please, NBA. That would just.
I'm just saying, Cooper Flag, he would be. I hate to say it, but he'd be the perfect star for Utah. We all know what Utah likes. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But I will say we're out of players to grade, but we do have one more grade to give out on the night. And this is our last grade of the night. We've finally come to the conclusion of the grade sheet, and it's not a player, it's a head coach, and it's Joe Mazzulla. Now, Joe Mazzulla he's not going to win Coach of the Year this year. The Celtics now. When you look at his career winning percentage, I will say this: better than Brad Stevens, better than Red Auerbach, better than a lot of coaches in NBA history. Small sample size, only 3 seasons under his belt, but Joe Mazzulla in those 3 seasons, 2 60-plus win seasons last year, 64, this season 61, hoisted into the head coaching role within the Celtics organization after Ime Udoka was ousted for finagling with employees behind the scenes, as we all know. Joe Mazzulla takes over, younger than Al Horford, leads the Celtics to 3 straight 55-plus win seasons, 2 straight 60-plus win seasons in a row. I got to give Joe Mazzulla a B+ here. I don't think it was an A+ year from Joe Mazzulla. We saw the January stretch. There were some confusing moments where the rotation, like the Rockets game in particular, we lost that game by 2. The rotations were just very wonky down the stretch at times, and during the losing streaks, we never really had a losing streak. It was back and forth, back and forth.
Yep.
During the losing spell, right, where we were back and forth, that time period, it felt like Joe Mazzulla, there are a lot of different looks he could go to right now to mix things up. And he just never did. Just never really did. So I got to dock him some points there. But for the rest of the season, it's been much of the same from what we've seen in the past. He's probably gotten better than what we've seen in the past when it comes to the X's and O's. But just as a leader of men, Joe Mazzulla, he's created a culture here with the Boston Celtics, and that's only shown through and through. And it's come around yet again with this team. Came around earlier in the season, went away there for a little bit. Not saying the culture went away, but the team playing hard, the winning went away for a little bit. But you saw that culture shine through in the second half of the season. And I think Joe Mazzulla, for all intents and purposes, considering the circumstances of how he made his way into the Celtics job, where he is within his Celtics head coaching career, I got to give him a B+ here. I would argue for maybe an A-, but again, some wonky moments with the rotations. The losing in the middle of the season could have gone with different looks, and we kind of tore them apart for different times of the year. Where looking back, it's like, was he actually being a serious coach, like playing Sam Hauser the fourth quarter against the Cavaliers, or was he just not tipping his hand that game? There are a couple of those moments where it's like either or. But I give Joe Mazzulla a B+ here, and again, I would argue for an A-, but I'm sticking with the B+ for who used to be second row Joe. Now he's first row Joe, as we all know.
That seems like the right grade to go with for Joe Mazzulla is a B+, because it's hard to say that he hasn't improved, because we've definitely seen his maturity levels within his coaching develop as he's been in the coaching helm. Obviously, when he was fed to the fire after the Ime Udoka situation, he was birthed by fire into the coaching realm, and you've kind of seen those. He's always been a guy that the Celtics can get behind. Obviously, the best words to describe Joe Mazzulla, and been saying it all year, and you just said it just now, was leader of men. He's got the entire locker room by the pulse, and he's one of those guys that you can tell that there is not a single player on this Celtics roster that doesn't respect Joe Mazzulla. There will be times that this team may butt heads, but I don't think there's ever a time that someone's going to step out of character against Joe Mazzulla and say that he's doing something wrong when it comes down to this team. And he's really gotten this team to develop and bond as a brotherhood and a family. And the coaching IQ is going to come along with it. I think that his career is there. He is only within the beginning of his coaching career. And when I say the beginning, we're probably going to be talking about Joe Mazzulla coaching in 20 to 30, 40 years. And
40 years, he'll be nearly 80. Could be. I mean, what is
70? I think he's around 30. What is he, 38 right now?
He's like 37, 30. He was like 36, 37, 38. I know he's like 2 years younger than Al Horford, so he's right around 36, 37, because Al Horford, he's 38, 39.
Yeah. So I see him as one of these characters that I can see coaching into his 60s, and I think that he will only learn the game of basketball more and more from X's and O's standpoint. We've seen that there were a couple of habits that Joe has done a good job of removing from this team. He's kind of shied away from having this team figure it out on the court when things are going wrong. He's been much better at calling those
has that been a
timeouts.
conversation we've talked about all season? Is him calling
Yeah.
timeouts? Like not once have we really had that conversation. We had
No.
that quite a few times last year.
Oh, we would literally be on post-game shows going like this: timeout, timeout, timeout. Hey Joe, when your team is losing the lead, go like that. And I just that
All
was
goes
something
away.
that completely strayed away. And another conversation that kind of strayed away was the fact that he's starting to make those second half adjustments, and you see this team adapting to what is going on the court around them, and not just be getting taken completely oblivious to what's going on if a team is running out a different game plan than the Celtics were expecting during pregame. You see them start to take that second to realize and make the actualization of what's going on, and make the adjustments within their lineup and within their game plan to counteract the counter that the other team has created on them. So I just think that Joe has grown within that standpoint. So I just know there's much more for him to learn, and I think the peak level of him coaching, you're going to see the next year. I feel like you're gonna see less of the hangover effect, and like this team really. I think they're gonna find a way to cut out the cruising that we've talked about so frequently in this show. That it seemed like this team wasn't putting forth 100% effort. I feel like that's one thing that Joe will need to improve on, is finding a way for this team to continue giving 100% without expelling all of their energy before a regular season or before a playoff begins. But other than that, whatever grade I gave him last year, I hope I improved upon that by giving him a B plus.
Well, I'll say this: you made an excellent point there within his second half adjustments and getting better in that. A lot of games we've seen this season, the Celtics, they've actually taken off in the second half, and that's where we see the sea of green. And that's what's so great to see, is the fact that the Celtics can come out of the locker room with a different game plan, a different approach, and go out there and win a ball game. And that's going to play so big into their hands come playoff time, because there are more of those in-game adjustments coming from Joe Mazzulla and the coaching staff, more strategic in-game adjustments. But that also goes along with the point of the team being able to play different styles of ball come playoff time, which is so huge for any playoff team. And what often makes a team a championship level team is they're able to play different styles of ball across the board and match up with any team out there possible. We know the Celtics have the bodies to do that, but do they have the strategy? We questioned that last year. Clearly they did last year. This season it'll be a little bit tougher, but you have to think another year along within Joe Mazzulla's coaching tenure, along with the rest of the roster, another year along within their cohesive chemistry together, that will pay off come playoff time in a good way for the C's. But that brings us to the end of our roster report card show here. Now let's run down all these grades before we hop off here real quick, and just give the viewers a conclusion, a skim down, a rundown of all of what we had graded. Because 3.5 hours, if you're still with us, folks, I mean, come on, we got to get Celtics Talk Weekly merch, like 10% off, 20% off. Hell, we'll give you the shirt for free. I mean, if you're sitting here for 3.5 hours listening to all these player grades, kudos to you. You're
I
a real
haven't even
CTW fan, real Celtics fan too. But here we go with all the grades. Now, I will say, I was trying to write your grades down as we go along, but I'm just going to ask you about all of them. I gave Tatum an A plus. You had Tatum where?
A plus.
Tatum A plus. I had Brown at a B minus.
I believe I had Brown at an A minus.
I had Porzingis at an A minus.
I had Porzingis at a B plus.
I had White at a B plus.
I had White at a B plus as well.
I had Holiday at a C plus.
I had Holiday at a B.
I had Horford at a B, a revised B.
I had Horford at a B minus.
I have Pritchard at an A plus.
I have Pritchard at an A plus as well.
Hauser, I have at a C minus.
Hauser, I had a C plus.
Cornet, an A plus.
Cornet was a B plus that I revised up to an A minus.
Oh. Okay. So I had Kata at a B.
And I had Kata at a C plus. This is where our grading is varied. Mine is
So the top half you guys can see just hearing from our voices here. Top half, very similar, a couple slots off. This bottom half is going to be a little wonky here. Shireman, B plus for me.
I had Shireman at a C plus.
Craig, I had at a D.
I had Craig at a C.
Walsh, I had at a D plus.
Jordan Walsh, I had at a C plus.
You were very generous with the C's, I will say. Three of the last four C pluses. The other one was a C. Tillman, I had Tillman at an F.
I had Tillman at a D.
I have JD Davison at an A plus.
I had JD Davison at a C.
I have Miles Norris at a B.
I just gave Miles Norris a C, or if I could, give him an I for incomplete.
Incomplete. That would be a good one. Peterson, I have him at a B.
Peterson, I put at a C as well. It was hard for any of these players to go below a C for me because they all just did well within the minutes that were oriented out to them, and they're also on the second best team in the East, record wise, 61-21. It's hard to. They're also the G League team did well, so it's hard to say that any of these guys, had a performance that would be less than a D for me, and if they did, they would probably be off this roster right now.
Well, mentioning two players who are actually off the roster, I had Springer at a B plus. What did you have for Springer?
I had Springer at a B because of the fact that he got rid of Lonnie Walker from us. I would have had that if Lonnie Walker stuck around during the regular season. There would have been another jersey behind me right now, and I would have been so much more. I probably would have had so much more enthusiasm about like these final 10 games of the regular season because hey, at least Lonnie Walker and Peyton Pritchard get to step up and steal the show. But nope, no one wanted Jaden Springer, so here we are.
Nope, they didn't want Ann Watson either. What'd you give Ann Watson at the end? I gave him an F. He was the only other F for me.
I think I gave him. I
don't even know if you gave him. Did you give him a grade?
He's another I for incomplete, D minus. I just literally don't know how he played for the main roster. Like I don't know if he was just like not performing well enough up in Maine that he wasn't like able to produce that minutes, or did he have like an attitude issue? Griffin and Andrew and Celtics Nation Rise, we are going to make sure you guys answer that question before playoffs begin.
Yeah, and Ann Watson is kind of part of the category of players too that could actually maybe be on this program one day. Like we get an interview, right? Can we get Ann Watson in here for like the finals? Like we had Matt Ryan in here last year for the finals, and this year it's like, hey, we get Ann Watson in, and it's, he's covering his former team that he didn't technically.
Well, he's in the playoffs.
That is one of the more perplexing storylines the whole season that nobody really cares about. But us,
see Anton Watson in round 2 of the playoffs. It might be Anton Watson versus JD Davison in the final 5 minutes of a garbage time game against New York in round 2. So maybe a storyline there.
I mean, there are Portland and Westchester connections there between those two players. But I will say, that brings us to the end of this roster report card segment. 3.5 hours later, I mean...
Is there anything else we could...
what else do we want to squeeze in here? Anything? I mean, we went over the whole roster, but I was looking at the beginning of this live stream. I'm like, So here's the thing: during these live streams, like you typically, you want to kind of move along. We're a little bit more in depth, right? At the beginning, we were doing a great job. What just happened over here?
I don't know. Something just exploded in the corner of my room, and I didn't touch anything to make a loud noise, and I just swore for the first time on air. But at least we're 3.5 hours in. If you're still around to hear that, good for you.
For real, because we literally went in depth on every player. I mean, at the beginning, we started so well. It's like, oh yeah, Jason Tatum. It took us like 4 minutes to talk about Tatum, and it's like, oh, Brown. It took us like 6 minutes to talk about Brown. It's like, oh, here we go. And then we got on a Holiday and Porzingis and White, and then we were on Porzingis. We were on like Porzingis and White and Holiday for like 40 minutes. Those players, like just them alone. And then after that, it was like, yeah, everybody's just getting their own 10-minute slot here, and it's kind of calculated. I'm like, this is going to go a pretty long time, but obviously we have now reached the end of the 2024-2025 Boston Celtics roster report card special. This is a special on here, the special edition of the CTW productional studio that we have going on here. But we will be with you next for a playoff preview, and that will be on, I want to say Tuesday. It'll be play-in/playoff preview on Tuesday. And then potentially later on in the day, we will have you covered for the Hawks Magic game coming up on the horizon. The winner of that game will face the Boston Celtics in round one of the 2025 NBA playoffs. And then we will have a series preview for the Celtics versus either Hawks or Magic series whenever that is determined after Tuesday. We will have that special to you coming on Thursday ahead of the playoffs. Celtics should be starting on Sunday. Not sure what the time slot will be for the Celtics on Sunday yet, but they will be playing Sunday, April 20th on Easter. The Celtics will be kicking off their 2025 playoff run, and we will have you guys covered here on the CTW network. We will have you covered on Postgame, not on here. This is not Postgame, folks. I mean, basically like Postgame, but not quite Postgame. But we will have you guys covered here. That does it for us here tonight, Franco. I'm your host, Seamus. Well, first of all, anything else we want to add, plug, anything, Franco?
Yeah, playoffs are here.
Playoffs are here. That's what I was.
We are
just got to make sure when you're going for 3.5 hours, you don't want to leave anything out.
It is 11:56 p.m. So we are technically 4 minutes away from the first day of the play-in tournament.
Oh yes. We went 4 more minutes to be 3 hours and 40 minutes on this broadcast, but we will go no further than 3:36, in which will be dedicated to Marcus Smart on the end, if we can actually get there and get out of here within the next 30 seconds, which I'm sure we will, because that is it for us here tonight. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo. Alongside of me over here, Nick Franco. We will have you guys covered on post game coming up, but as I always say, thank you all for watching, and go Celtics.